The library doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed through marble halls. Rain hammered against towering windows as Lydia Hartwell stood before the man she'd called husband, watching him sign away their marriage with the same cold precision he used on estate ledgers. 2 years. That's all the time he'd given her to produce an heir before declaring her useless. What Duke Victor Blackmore didn't know, what she'd discovered only that morning, would change everything. But Lydia said nothing. She simply lifted her chin, turned her back on privilege, and walked into a storm that would either destroy her or forge her into something he could never control. If you want to see how far a discarded duchess can fall, and how high she can rise, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain started the moment Victor's carriage disappeared down the tree-lined avenue, as if the sky itself had been waiting for permission to weep. Lydia stood at the entrance of Thornwick Manor, watching the taillights fade into sheets of gray, her traveling cloak already soaked through, one hand pressed against her abdomen where a secret the size of a poppy seed was taking root. "Ma'am?" The groundskeeper's voice cut through the downpour. Should I fetch your things from the main house?" Lydia turned to face the estate that would be her prison or her salvation. She hadn't decided which yet. Thornwick Manor sprawled before her like a wounded animal, all crumbling stone and ivy-choked windows. 3 stories of neglect. Victor's generosity, he'd called it. A roof over her head. An allowance that wouldn't cover a season's worth of candles in the life she was leaving behind. "There are no things," she said quietly. The Duke was quite clear. "I leave with what I'm wearing." The old man's face crumpled. "That's not—" "It's exactly right." She stepped past him toward the sagging front door. "It's honest, at least. More honest than the last 2 years." The entrance hall smelled of mildew and abandonment. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like bruises. The chandelier that might have once sparkled now hung crooked, half its crystals missing. Lydia's footsteps echoed on warped floorboards as she moved deeper into the house, trailing water, her fine leather boots squelching with each step. In the library, because of course there was a library even in a house left to rot, she found the first sign of Victor's particular cruelty. The shelves were full. Leather-bound volumes on agriculture, medicine, philosophy, law. Books she would have treasured once, books that mocked her now because what use was knowledge when you were starving? She ran her fingers along the spines, stopping at a thick medical text. Culpeper's Complete Herbal. The irony wasn't lost on her. Victor's mother had died in childbirth. His first wife, the one he never spoke of, had lost 3 babies before succumbing to fever. And now Victor had discarded the second wife who'd failed to breed on his schedule. Lydia pulled the book down, cradling it against her chest. Then she walked to the window and watched the storm devour what remained of daylight. "I won't beg," she whispered to the empty room. "I won't write letters. I won't play the tragic heroine waiting for rescue." Her reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked like a stranger, pale skin, dark hair plastered to her skull, eyes that had been soft 2 years ago now hard as river stones. 23 years old and already a ghost. The baby, if there even was a baby, if the slight nausea and missed courses weren't just her body's response to stress, wouldn't be born into begging. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "We'll learn?" she told the barely there flutter in her belly. "We'll learn everything." The first week nearly killed her. Not metaphorically, actually genuinely almost killed her. Thornwick had no staff. The groundskeeper lived in the village 2 miles down a rutted road and came twice weekly to keep the grounds from becoming complete wilderness. There was a root cellar stocked with potatoes going soft and carrots so old they bent like rubber. A pantry with weevil-infested flour and a wheel of cheese sporting an impressive coat of mold. Lydia had never cooked a meal in her life. She'd never built a fire, pumped water from a well, or slaughtered anything larger than her own pride. The first night, she ate raw potato because she couldn't figure out how to work the ancient kitchen stove. The second night, she managed to start a fire in the library hearth and nearly burned the house down when a spark caught the curtains. The third night, she sat on the kitchen floor and cried so hard she threw up. By the 4th night, she'd stopped crying. By the 7th, she'd killed her first chicken. The bird had been scratching in the overgrown garden, probably wild, possibly feral. Lydia had chased it for 20 minutes before cornering it against the garden wall. It squawked and flapped and tried to claw her face. She'd grabbed it with both hands, remembered a passage from one of the farming manuals, and twisted its neck with a sharp, brutal motion that made her stomach heave. Then she'd plucked it, gutted it, and roasted it over the library fire while reading Culpeper by candlelight. The meat was tough and underseasoned and absolutely the most satisfying thing she'd ever eaten. To survival, she'd toasted with well water in a chipped teacup. The nausea got worse. Morning sickness, she confirmed from the medical texts. She was definitely pregnant, probably about 6 weeks along if her calculations were right. Due sometime in early spring, she had roughly 7 months to figure out how not to die. The village of Thornwick-on-Marsh was exactly as depressing as its name suggested. A collection of sagging cottages clustered around a church with a crooked steeple, bisected by a stream that flooded every spring and smelled like sewage every summer. 300 souls, give or take. Farmers, mostly. A blacksmith. A tavern that doubled as everything else. Meeting hall, courthouse, marketplace. Lydia walked into the village on a gray morning in late September, wearing her least destroyed dress and carrying a basket of herbs she'd harvested from Thornwick's wild garden. The first person she encountered was a woman hauling water from the communal well, middle-aged, sturdy, face like weather-beaten leather. "Morning," Lydia offered. The woman looked her up and down, registered the quality of the dress despite its condition, registered the pale hands, the soft voice, the upright posture. "You're the Duchess." Not a question. "I was." Lydia shifted the basket. "Now I'm just Lydia." "Right." The woman spat into the dirt. "And I'm the Queen of France." "I'm looking for work." That got a laugh, sharp and mean. "Work? What can you do, Your Grace? Embroider? Play piano? Faint prettily?" Lydia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "I can read. I know medicinal herbs. I'm willing to learn anything else. We got old Maggie for herbs and healing. Don't need fancy ladies playing at medicine." "I'm not playing." The woman hoisted her water bucket. "Sure you're not. Give it a month, Duchess. You'll be crawling back to wherever you came from." She walked away, and Lydia stood there in the village square, feeling every eye on her back. But she didn't leave. She walked to the tavern instead. The tavern keeper was a man called Brennan, 50-something, missing teeth, suspicious of everything. He looked at Lydia like she was a bad debt come to collect. "What do you want?" "Work, food, information, in that order." Brennan wiped down the bar with a rag that made it dirtier. "No work." "I can read and write. Do you need help with—" "I said no work." Lydia set her basket on the bar. "These are medicinal herbs. Feverfew, chamomile, yarrow, comfrey. I'll trade them for food." He poked through the basket suspiciously, like the herbs might bite. "Old Maggie sells herbs." "I'm not Maggie." "That's the problem." He pushed the basket back. "Folks around here don't trust outsiders, especially not failed nobility pretending to be common. I'm not pretending anything." Lydia's patience was wearing thin. "I need to eat. You need something. There has to be a trade we can make." Brennan studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "My daughter's sick." Lydia went still. "How sick?" "Fever. 3 days now. Won't eat. Sleeps all the time. Maggie gave her something, but it's not working." "Let me see her." "Why would I—" "Because I have nothing to lose," Lydia interrupted, "and your daughter might have everything to lose if she gets worse. Let me try." Another long silence, then Brennan jerked his head toward the back. "Upstairs. Don't make her worse, or I'll throw you in the stream myself." The girl's name was Rose. She was 8 years old and burning up. Lydia knelt beside the narrow bed in the tiny room above the tavern, pressing the back of her hand to the child's forehead. Dangerously hot, skin dry, breathing shallow and fast. "When did the fever start?" Lydia asked. Brennan hovered in the doorway like he might need to grab Lydia at any moment. "Sunday night. Came on sudden." "Any vomiting, rash, complaints of pain?" Sick to her stomach. "Monday, No rash. Said her head hurt. Lydia pulled back the thin blanket. The girl's arms were stick thin, her breathing labored. Has she been drinking water? Some, not much. She's dehydrated. Lydia looked up at him. I need willow bark, cool water, clean cloth, and honey if you have it. What are you going to do? Bring the fever down, get fluids in her, then figure out what's actually wrong. She stood. Do you have those things or not? Brennan stared at her like he was trying to read her soul. Then he nodded and disappeared. Lydia turned back to Rose. The girl's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Her lips were cracked and pale. I don't know what I'm doing, Lydia whispered, placing a hand on the girl's small shoulder. But I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. She spent the next 6 hours at Rose's bedside. First, she brewed willow bark tea, bitter and strong, and coaxed small sips past the girl's lips. Then she soaked cloth in cool water and laid it across Rose's forehead, changing it every few minutes as it warmed. She massaged the girl's arms and legs to keep blood flowing. She dripped honey water between her lips when she wouldn't swallow tea. Brennan brought food, bread and cheese, but Lydia barely touched it. By evening, Rose's fever had dropped slightly. Not broken, but not climbing. By midnight, Lydia was reading Culpeper by candlelight, cross-referencing symptoms, trying to determine if this was something viral or bacterial, serious or survivable. By dawn, Rose opened her eyes. Who are you? The girl's voice was a rasp. Lydia nearly sobbed with relief. A friend! How do you feel? Tired, thirsty. Good. Thirsty is good. Lydia helped her drink. We're going to keep you drinking and sleeping and getting better. Rose managed a tiny smile before drifting off again. When Brennan came up an hour later, he found Lydia asleep in the chair beside the bed, Culpeper open on her lap, dark circles under her eyes. He stood there for a long time, looking at the Duchess, who wasn't a Duchess anymore. Then he went downstairs and started cooking breakfast. But Rose recovered over the next week. Slowly, frustratingly, slowly, but steadily. Lydia stayed at the tavern, sleeping in the storeroom, earning her keep by helping in the kitchen and continuing to tend Rose. Brennan didn't pay her in coin, he couldn't afford that, but he fed her and didn't ask questions about why she wasn't at the manor. Word spread. The Duchess who'd been cast out was healing Brennan's daughter. Some people were curious. Most were skeptical. A few were openly hostile. Old Maggie came to the tavern on the 5th day of Rose's recovery. She was exactly what Lydia expected. Ancient, sharp-eyed, smelling of wood smoke and herbs. She pushed into Rose's room without knocking, examined the girl with gnarled hands, then turned to Lydia. You know what you're doing? I'm learning. Learning on sick children, bold. Better than letting them die while I study theory. Maggie's eyes narrowed. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. You got spine, Duchess. More than I expected. She moved toward the door, then paused. Willow bark was the right call, but next time, add elderflower. Helps with fever sweats. Come by my cottage tomorrow. I'll show you what grows around here that's actually useful. She left before Lydia could respond. Brennan, who'd been listening from the hallway, stuck his head in. Did old Maggie just offer to teach you? I think so. Huh. He scratched his head. First time for everything. Lydia went to Maggie's cottage the next morning. It was deep in the woods south of the village, a stone hut with a thatched roof and garden beds overflowing with plants Lydia couldn't begin to identify. Maggie was waiting outside, smoking a pipe that smelled like mushrooms and regret. You pregnant? Maggie asked without preamble. Lydia froze. How did you... You got that look, tired but glowing. Sick in the mornings, I'd wager. How far along? There was no point lying. About 8 weeks. A father know? Yes, he doesn't care. Maggie spat. Men rarely do. You planning to keep it? Yes. Then you better learn fast. Baby won't wait for you to read every book in that moldy library. She tapped her pipe against the doorframe. Come on. I'll show you what you need to know to not kill anyone, including yourself. For the next month, Lydia split her time between Thornwick Manor and Maggie's cottage. Maggie taught her which herbs stopped bleeding, which induced vomiting, which could kill you if you used too much. She taught her to identify plants by smell, by touch, by the shape of their leaves in moonlight. She taught her to make poultices and tinctures and teas. She taught her the difference between healing and hoping. "Medicine's not magic," Maggie said one afternoon as they harvested mushrooms. "It's pattern recognition and probability. You see the same symptoms often enough, you start to know what works. But sometimes nothing works. You have to make peace with that." "I don't want to make peace with failure. Then you'll die miserable." Maggie straightened, joints cracking. "People die, Duchess. Good people. Children. Mothers. Men who don't deserve it. You can't save everyone, but you can save some. That has to be enough." Lydia pressed a hand to her growing belly. "What if it's not?" "Then you burn out and become useless to everyone, including that baby." Maggie looked at her hard. "You want to be a healer? Learn to grieve fast and move on. Otherwise, you're just torturing yourself for show." It was the most brutally honest thing anyone had ever said to her. Lydia carried it like a stone in her chest. By late October, Lydia had become a fixture in Thornwick-on-Marsh. She wasn't trusted exactly, but she wasn't openly scorned anymore either. She'd helped deliver a baby when the midwife was 3 villages away. She'd treated a farmer's infected hand before it turned gangrenous. She'd sat with a dying old woman and made her comfortable in her final hours. She still lived at the manor, still hauled her own water and killed her own chickens. But now the groundskeeper brought her firewood without asking. The woman from the well left eggs on her doorstep. Brennan saved her the best cuts of meat when hunters brought game to the tavern. Small kindnesses. Nothing that felt like charity. Just reciprocity. Lydia's pregnancy was showing now. A small, firm swell beneath her increasingly creative wardrobe adjustments. She'd let out seams until there were no seams left to let out, then started wrapping herself in shawls and pretending it was a fashion choice. No one mentioned it directly, but everyone knew. One evening in early November, Lydia was in the manor library reading by firelight when someone knocked on the front door. She wasn't expecting visitors. Maggie didn't knock. Brennan sent word if he needed her. She answered the door with a kitchen knife hidden in her skirts, just in case. A man stood on the threshold. Young, maybe 30. Well-dressed but travel-worn. Nervous eyes. "Duchess Hartwell?" Lydia's blood went cold. "Who's asking?" "My name is Thomas Fairfax. I was your husband's secretary." "Was? What do you want?" Thomas glanced over his shoulder like he expected pursuit. "May I come in? It's not safe to talk here." Every instinct screamed trap, but Lydia stepped aside. Thomas entered quickly, and she shut the door behind him. They stood in the dim entrance hall, sizing each other up. "Victor doesn't know I'm here," Thomas said quietly. "If he finds out, I'll lose my position, possibly worse." "Then why are you here?" "Because someone needs to tell you the truth." He pulled a letter from his coat. "This arrived a month ago. The Duke burned it, but I made a copy." Lydia took the letter with trembling hands. The seal was broken, but she recognized the crest, the royal physician's office. She read it once, twice, then looked up at Thomas with something like fury building behind her eyes. "Victor is sterile?" Thomas nodded miserably. "A childhood illness. Mumps, the physician thinks, damaged him permanently. He can't father children, has never been able to." The room spun. Lydia gripped the back of a chair. "The physician said it's impossible that Victor could have—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Which means if you're pregnant," Thomas said gently, "it's not his child. It is his child." The words came out too loud, too desperate. Lydia forced herself to breathe. "I was never unfaithful. Not once. Not ever." "I believe you." Thomas held up his hands. "But Victor won't. When he finds out you're carrying, and he will find out, these things always get out. He'll accuse you of adultery, and he'll have the medical proof to back it up." Lydia sank into the chair. Her mind raced through possibilities, outcomes, disasters. If Victor learned she was pregnant, he could claim the child wasn't his, could accuse her publicly of infidelity, could have her stripped of what little status she had left, could take the baby and raise it as a ward, or worse, discarded as a bastard, all because his own body had failed him, and he'd rather destroy her than admit weakness. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Thomas looked uncomfortable. "Because I've watched the Duke destroy everything good in his life out of pride. His first wife, his relationship with his own brother, and now you." He straightened. "I don't have power to stop him, but I can give you information. What you do with it is your choice." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Duchess, I think you're better off out here than you ever were in that house. The person you're becoming, Victor could never understand her, and that's his loss, not yours." Then he was gone, disappearing into the November darkness. Lydia sat alone in the cold entrance hall, one hand on her belly, the physician's letter crumpling in her fist. She should have felt panic, terror, despair. Instead, she felt something crystallize inside her chest, something hard and clear and absolutely unbreakable. "He doesn't get to decide," she whispered to her unborn child. "Not anymore. Not ever again." She stood, walked to the library, and threw the letter into the fire. Then she pulled down every medical text on childbirth she could find and started reading. If the world wanted to come for her and her baby, it would find her ready. Winter came early to Thornwick. By December, the village was buried under snow. The stream froze solid. Livestock huddled in barns. People stayed indoors unless absolutely necessary. Lydia's pregnancy was impossible to hide now. She was 5 months along, belly round and prominent. She moved more carefully, tired more easily, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. A fever broke out in the village just after Christmas. It started with the children. 2 families, 6 kids total. High fevers, racking coughs, bodies too weak to stand. Maggie came to Thornwick Manor on a snow-blind morning, looking older than Lydia had ever seen her. "I need help," the old woman said without preamble. "It's spreading. I can't handle all of them alone." Lydia was already pulling on her cloak. "How bad?" "Bad. 2 might not make it through the week without constant care." "Then they'll have constant care." Maggie looked at Lydia's swollen belly. "You shouldn't be doing this. Not in your condition. My condition is pregnancy, not paralysis." Lydia tied her cloak. "Those children need help now. We can argue about my limitations after they're breathing easier." For the next week, Lydia barely slept. She moved between cottages in the freezing dark, carrying tinctures and teas, sitting vigil beside fevered children, teaching exhausted mothers how to steam their children's lungs with hot water and herbs. She nearly collapsed twice. Maggie forced her to eat. Brennan brought food to whatever house she was in. The village women took turns accompanying her through the snow so she wouldn't fall alone. One night, in a cottage where a 4-year-old boy named Samuel fought for every breath, Lydia felt the baby kick for the first time. A flutter, then a push, like a hand pressing from inside. She was so startled she laughed. This broken, exhausted sound that made Samuel's mother look up from her own exhausted vigil. "You all right, my lady?" Lydia pressed her hand to her belly. "The baby just kicked." The woman's face softened. "That's good. Means they're strong. I hope so." Lydia looked down at Samuel, his small chest rising and falling too fast. "I hope they're both strong." By dawn, Samuel's fever broke. By the end of the week, all 6 children were recovering. Lydia made it back to Thornwick Manor and slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, the groundskeeper was waiting in her kitchen with fresh bread and a message. "The village wants to thank you," he said gruffly. "They're holding a gathering tomorrow night at the tavern." Lydia blinked, still foggy from sleep. "A gathering?" "A celebration for the children's recovery and—" He looked uncomfortable. "For you. They want to honor you proper." "That's not necessary. It is to them." He set the bread on the table. "You saved their children, my lady. That's not something folks forget." The tavern was packed when Lydia arrived. Every family whose child she'd treated was there. Maggie sat in the corner smoking her pipe and looking amused. Brennan had laid out what passed for a feast in Thornwick: roasted meat, fresh bread, winter vegetables, even a cake. When Lydia walked in, the room went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping, standing, making space for her at the center table like she was someone who mattered. Lydia stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed. Brennan crossed to her, grinning. "Come on, Duchess, let people say thank you." I'm not. She couldn't find words. "You are," he said firmly. "You're one of us now, whether you like it or not." The evening blurred. People brought her food she couldn't eat, told stories about their children's recoveries, asked about her baby with genuine warmth. Samuel's mother gave her a hand-knitted blanket. An old farmer offered to repair the manor's roof before the baby came. Somewhere around midnight, Maggie cornered her. "You did good, girl." Lydia felt tears prick her eyes, exhaustion and hormones, and something deeper. "I just did what needed doing. That's all healing ever is." Maggie patted her arm. "But you did it when you didn't have to, when you could have stayed in that manor feeling sorry for yourself. That's the difference between medicine and mercy." "I don't feel merciful." "Good. Mercy's overrated. Competence matters more." Maggie straightened. "You're going to be all right. You and that baby both. I'll make sure of it." It was as close to a blessing as Lydia had ever received. She held on to it like a lifeline. January brought bitter cold and isolation. The snow piled so high that travel between villages became impossible. Lydia spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival, sewing tiny clothes from old linens, reading obsessively about childbirth complications, stockpiling herbs for pain and bleeding and infection. She was 7 months pregnant now, huge and uncomfortable and terrified. At night, lying alone in the manor's freezing library, because it was the only room she could keep warm, she talked to the baby. "Your father doesn't know you exist," she whispered, "and that's all right. We don't need him. We're going to be fine, you and me. We're going to survive this." The baby kicked in response, and Lydia chose to believe it was agreement. Then, on a gray afternoon in late January, a carriage appeared on the snow-packed road. Not a merchant's wagon, not a farmer's cart, a nobleman's carriage, polished black, gold trim. The Blackmore crest on the door. Lydia watched from the library window as it rolled to a stop in front of the manor. Her first thought was run. Her second was stand your ground. She chose the second. By the time the carriage door opened, Lydia was standing in the entrance hall, spine straight, hands folded over her swollen belly. Victor Blackmore stepped out into the snow. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, dark-haired, handsome in a cold, aristocratic way. But there was something different about his eyes, something that might have been regret if she didn't know better. He walked to the door, knocked. Lydia waited a full minute before opening it. They stood on opposite sides of the threshold, looking at each other across an ocean of silence. Finally, Victor spoke. "You're pregnant." Not a question, a statement, flat and factual. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "Is it mine?" Lydia felt something dangerous rise in her chest, not anger, not hurt, something colder. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. If you've been unfaithful, I haven't." Her voice cut like glass. "I was never unfaithful. Not once. Not ever. But you'll believe what you want to believe, Victor. You always have." He stepped forward. She stepped back. "Don't," she said quietly. "You don't get to come here and demand answers. You ended this marriage. You sent me away. What I do now, who I am now, is none of your concern. The child, is mine." The words came out fierce, final. "Mine to raise, mine to protect. You gave up any claim when you signed those papers." Victor's composure cracked. "Lydia, I made a mistake." "Yes, you did. Let me fix it. Come back. We can—" "No." He stared at her like she'd slapped him. "No?" "I needed you 2 years ago, Victor. I needed a partner, not a judge. I needed support, not exile. You gave me neither." She straightened despite the weight of exhaustion and pregnancy and rage. "But you know what? I'm glad you sent me away. Because the person I was in your house, she would have died. Slowly, quietly, perfectly dressed, and completely hollow. And now I'm alive. She placed a hand on her belly. And I'm strong, and I'm needed. I heal people. I save lives. I matter here in ways I never mattered to you. Victor looked past her at the shabby entrance hall, the peeling paint, the poverty. You'd rather have this than… Yes, no hesitation. I'd rather have this truth than your beautiful lie. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Victor did something she'd never seen him do before. He broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, just crumbled at the edges. I can't have children, he said, voice rough. I'm sterile, have been since I was a boy. I found out 2 months ago. Lydia felt the world tilt. You knew? I suspected. The physician confirmed it. He looked at her belly, which means that child can't be mine. Physically impossible. It's yours, Lydia said fiercely. I don't care what's physically possible. I was never with anyone else. This baby is yours. That's not how biology works. Then biology is wrong. They stood there in the snow and the silence, two people who'd shared a bed for 2 years and understood each other not at all. Finally, Lydia said, Why are you really here, Victor? He looked at her with something raw in his eyes. Because I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what matters. He took a breath. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking, begging, for a chance, not to fix the marriage, not to reclaim you like property, just a chance to prove I can be better than I was. Better how? However you need me to be. Lydia wanted to slam the door in his face, wanted to scream that it was too late, that damage done couldn't be undone, that some betrayals didn't heal. But she was 7 months pregnant in a freezing manner with winter closing in, and she was so tired. I need to think, she said finally. Victor nodded. I'll be at the inn, in the village. Take whatever time you need. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Lydia, the person you've become out here? She's extraordinary. I was a fool not to see it before. Then he walked back to his carriage and drove away, leaving Lydia standing in the doorway with a hand on her belly and a choice she'd never expected to face. Lydia didn't sleep that night. She paced the library until her feet ached, then sat in the old armchair by the fire trying to make sense of Victor's confession. Sterile. The word kept circling in her head like a vulture. He couldn't have children. Had never been able to. Which meant, according to every physician, every medical text, every law of nature, this baby wasn't his. Except it was. She pressed both hands against her belly, feeling the flutter of movement inside. I don't understand it either, she whispered. But you're his. I know you are. The fire popped. Outside, wind howled through bare trees. By dawn, Lydia had made a decision that surprised even herself. She would talk to Victor. Not because she owed him anything, not because she wanted reconciliation, but because if the medical establishment believed his sterility was absolute, and she appeared in society pregnant with another man's child, the scandal would destroy any future she tried to build. For herself. For the baby. Better to face him now. On her terms. In her territory. She sent word to the village inn with the groundskeeper. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone. Victor arrived exactly on time, climbing down from a simple hired carriage instead of his ostentatious one. He wore traveling clothes, not aristocratic finery. Trying to meet her halfway, she realized. The gesture would have touched her once. Now it just made her tired. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The library was the warmest room, so she led him there. They sat on opposite sides of the fireplace like negotiators at a parley, which Lydia supposed they were. Thank you for seeing me, Victor began. Don't. We're not doing pleasantries. Lydia folded her hands over her belly. You said you were sterile. How certain are you? The royal physician examined me, twice. The damage from mumps, it's permanent, complete. Victor's jaw tightened. I can't father children, Lydia. It's not speculation. It's medical fact. And yet I'm pregnant. Yes. They looked at each other across an impossible chasm. I was never unfaithful, Lydia said quietly. I need you to hear that. Really hear it. There was no other man. No secret affair. No moment of weakness. Just you. Only you. Something shifted in Victor's face. I believe you. You do? I know you. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You're many things, Lydia. But you're not a liar. If you say there was no one else, then there wasn't. Relief and frustration warred in her chest. Then how do you explain this? She gestured at her swollen belly. I can't. Victor ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of helplessness she'd never seen from him. The physicians can't either, but impossible things happen sometimes. Miracles. Mistakes in diagnosis. I don't know. What I do know is that child is more mine than any heir I could have demanded from you. Because you can't have any others. Because you suffered to carry it. His voice cracked. Because you're facing everything alone that we should have faced together. Because I threw you away when I should have... He stopped, breathed. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking if there's any world where we could start over, differently. Lydia studied him, really looked, and saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Victor Blackmore, who commanded rooms with a glance, who never questioned his own authority, was afraid. What would starting over look like? She asked carefully. I don't know. You tell me. I'm not coming back to your estate. I'm not asking you to. That surprised her. Then what are you asking? Victor spread his hands. Let me be part of this. The pregnancy, the birth, the child's life. Not as a duke reclaiming property, as a father. However you'll allow it. And if I don't allow it at all, then I'll leave. His eyes held hers. And I'll make sure you have everything you need financially, legally. You and the child will be protected regardless. Lydia felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the possibility of something less poisonous than hatred. I need time, she said finally, to think, to figure out what I actually want. How much time? However much I need. Victor nodded slowly. Then he stood, pulled an envelope from his coat, and set it on the table between them. Banknotes. Enough to repair this house, hire help, stock the pantry for a year. It's not charity. It's what I should have provided from the start. He moved toward the door, then paused. I meant what I said yesterday. The person you've become. She's someone worth knowing. I'd like the chance to know her. If you'll let me. After he left, Lydia sat alone with the envelope in her lap and the baby kicking against her ribs. She felt like she was standing at a crossroads in fog, unable to see where either path led. So she did what she always did when confused. She went to find Maggie. The old woman was in her garden, cutting back dead growth despite the cold. She looked up when Lydia approached and immediately pointed at a stump. Sit, before you fall over. Lydia sat, grateful. The Duke came to see me. I heard, village is buzzing. Maggie kept cutting. What do you want? To apologize. To be involved. To, I don't know, fix things, maybe. Can't fix what's broken that thoroughly. That's what I thought too, but he seems different. Men don't change, girl. They just get better at pretending. Maggie pointed her shears. What do you want? Not what he wants, not what's proper. What do you actually want? Lydia pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the flutter of life inside. I want my child to have a father, a real one, not a distant benefactor who sends money and shows up twice a year. That's what you want for the baby. What about you? The question landed like a stone. What did she want? Safety, security. Those were practical, but deeper? I want to matter, Lydia said quietly. I want to be seen, not as an ornament or a failure or a scandal, just seen. Maggie stopped cutting and looked at her straight. Then make him see you, not the Duchess he married, the woman you are now. And if he can't handle that woman, if he wants to soften you back into something manageable, you send him away for good. What if he can handle it? Then you'll have something rare. Maggie went back to her pruning. A partnership instead of a performance. But don't settle for less just because you're scared. You survived alone. You can keep surviving alone if you have to. Lydia sat with that truth all the way back to the manor. That evening, she wrote Victor a letter, short, direct. You can stay in the village. You can visit the manor. But you don't get to make decisions. You don't get to tell me how to live. You watch. You learn. You prove yourself. Then we'll see. She sent it with the groundskeeper and went to bed feeling something that might have been hope or might have been insanity. The next 3 weeks were strange. Victor stayed at the inn but came to Thornwick Manor every afternoon, not to negotiate or convince, just to be present. He chopped firewood, repaired the sagging front steps, sat in the library reading while Lydia studied medical texts. They talked, but carefully, like people learning a new language. "Why medicine?" he asked one afternoon. Lydia looked up from Culpeper. "Because people need it, because I'm good at it, because it's the first thing I've ever done that felt like mine." "You could have studied medicine before, at the estate." "No, I couldn't. There wasn't room for it, not with all the performing I was doing." Victor winced. "Was it really that bad?" "Worse." Lydia set the book down. Every dinner was a test. Every conversation was a performance. I spent 2 years trying to be what you wanted instead of figuring out who I was. And when I failed, you discarded me. I did. No excuses, no justifications. "I'm sorry." The apology sat between them like something fragile. "Sorry doesn't fix it," Lydia said finally, "but it's a start." By mid-February, the village had accepted Victor's presence the way they accepted bad weather, inevitable and mildly annoying but not worth fighting. He ate at the tavern, helped with repairs, didn't pull rank or demand special treatment. Brennan cornered Lydia one evening while she was checking on Rose, who'd caught a mild cold. "Your husband's less of an ass than I expected." Lydia nearly laughed. "That's high praise from you." "Don't mean I trust him, just mean he's trying." Brennan crossed his arms. "Question is, are you going to let him?" "I don't know yet." "Fair enough." He jerked his head toward the tap room where Victor was playing cards with some farmers. "But for what it's worth, man who's willing to chop firewood and lose at cards without complaining might be worth a second look." Lydia watched through the doorway as Victor laughed at something one of the farmers said. Real laughter, not the polished social kind. Maybe Brennan was right. Then everything went wrong. It started with a messenger arriving at the inn, breathless and panicked. "There's a family, the Carters, 3 miles north. Whole household is sick. Bad sick. They sent their oldest boy to find help." Lydia was already pulling on her cloak. "What symptoms?" "Fever, vomiting, can't keep water down. Started yesterday." That was fast, too fast for normal illness. "I'm coming," Maggie said, appearing from the back room. "So am I," Victor added. Lydia started to protest, then stopped. She was 8 months pregnant. Maggie was 70 if she was a day. They needed another pair of hands. "Fine, but you follow our lead." The Carter farm was a nightmare. 6 people, parents, 3 children, and a grandmother, all down with violent illness. The house reeked of vomit and worse. The youngest child, maybe 2 years old, was barely conscious. Lydia fought down nausea and fear and moved into the first room. "Maggie, check the grandmother and the older kids. Victor, boil water. Lots of it. I need clean cloth and whatever herbs we have for stomach ailments." For the next 6 hours, they worked without stopping. Lydia moved between patients, checking vitals, administering tinctures, trying to get fluids into bodies that rejected everything. The parents were stable enough. The older children were suffering but responsive. The toddler was dying. Lydia knew it with the certainty that came from too much recent experience. The child's breathing was shallow, pulse thready, skin cold and clammy. Classic signs of severe dehydration and shock. She tried everything. Tiny sips of water with honey. Willow bark for fever. Cool compresses, massaging the small limbs to keep blood flowing. Nothing worked. By midnight, the child's breathing turned raspy. By 1 in the morning, it stopped. Lydia sat beside the small body, hands shaking, feeling the weight of failure settle over her like a shroud. Maggie found her there 20 minutes later. "Girl, come on." "I couldn't save her." "No, you couldn't." Maggie's voice was rough. "Sometimes you can't. I told you that." "She was 2 years old." "I know." Maggie pulled Lydia to her feet. "But her parents are alive. Her siblings are alive. You saved 4 out of 6. That's not nothing." It felt like nothing. Victor appeared in the doorway, face pale. The others are stable. I think the worst is past. He saw Lydia's face and understood. The little one? Gone, Maggie said shortly. Victor looked at Lydia and did something unexpected. He crossed the room and pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling her head. For a moment Lydia stiffened, then she collapsed into him and sobbed, great wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deep and broken. He didn't say anything, didn't try to comfort her with empty words, just held her while she fell apart. When she finally pulled away, eyes swollen and raw, he said quietly, "What do you need?" "To bury her." "Well," Lydia wiped her face. "Properly. Not in a pauper's grave. She deserves better." "Then we'll do it properly." They stayed until dawn, helping the grieving family. Victor paid for the burial. Lydia sat with the mother while Maggie prepared the body. No one mentioned that Lydia shouldn't be doing this kind of work this pregnant. No one suggested she rest. They understood. She needed to see it through. The funeral was small, just family, Maggie, Lydia, and Victor. The village priest said words that felt hollow. The mother wept silently. The father stood stone-faced, holding his surviving children close. Lydia stood apart, one hand on her swollen belly, feeling her baby kick against her palm. Life and death. So close, they were almost the same thing. That night, back at the manor, she and Victor sat in the library, exhausted, wrung out, raw. "I wanted to save her," Lydia said into the silence. "I know. It's not enough. Wanting, trying. It's not enough. Sometimes it's all we have." Lydia looked at him, really looked, and saw someone who understood loss in ways she'd never recognized before. His first wife. The babies that never lived. The children he could never have. "You've been here before," she said quietly. "This feeling." "Yes." "How do you survive it?" Victor was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You remember that you tried, that you showed up, that you fought for someone who needed fighting for, and you let that be enough, because the alternative is drowning." Lydia felt tears slip down her face again. "I'm so tired of losing things." "Then stop." He leaned forward. "Stop losing things. That child in your belly, hold on to it. This life you've built, protect it. The person you've become, don't let anyone, including me, take that away." "What if I can't protect all of it?" "Then you choose what matters most, and you fight like hell for that." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "And if you want help fighting, I'm here. However you'll have me." Lydia looked at their joined hands, felt the calluses on his palm from weeks of manual labor, saw the exhaustion in his eyes that matched her own. This wasn't romance. It wasn't love. It was something stranger and maybe more honest. Two broken people trying to build something functional from the ruins. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? You can stay, be part of this, but on my terms." "What terms?" "I keep healing. I keep learning. I don't become decoration again." She squeezed his hand. "And you don't get to decide what's best for me, or the baby. We decide together, equal voices." Victor looked at her like she was proposing revolution, which, in their world, she was. "Equal voices," he repeated. "You're serious." "Completely." For a moment she thought he'd balk, pull rank, remind her that dukes didn't share authority. Instead, he smiled, small and real and almost wondering. "Equal voices," he agreed. "I'll try not to be terrible at it." "You'll probably fail sometimes." "Probably. Will you tell me when I do?" "Loudly." He laughed, actually laughed, and something in Lydia's chest unclenched. Maybe this could work. Maybe. The next morning brought new crisis. Lydia woke to cramping so severe it doubled her over. She barely made it out of bed before liquid gushed down her legs. Too much, too fast. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Not water breaking. Blood. She managed 3 steps toward the door before her knees buckled. "Victor!" The scream tore from her throat, and then he was there. Must have been sleeping in the next room. Must have been close, catching her before she hit the floor. "What's wrong? Lydia, what?" He saw the blood spreading across her nightgown and his face went white. No, no, we need Maggie. We need Maggie. Can't walk, Lydia gasped. The baby. Something's wrong with the baby. Victor scooped her up without hesitation and ran through the freezing manor, out into pre-dawn darkness, toward the village with Lydia bleeding in his arms, and both of them praying to anyone who might listen that they wouldn't be too late. Maggie took one look at the blood and went into efficient crisis mode. Get her on the bed. Boil water. Clean cloths. Every herb I have for bleeding and pain, green jars on the top shelf. She was already examining Lydia, hands moving with practiced speed. How far along? 32 weeks, Lydia managed through gritted teeth. Too early, but not impossible. Maggie looked up at Victor, who stood frozen in the doorway. Move! I need those supplies now! He moved. The next hours were a blur of pain and terror. Lydia felt her body trying to expel the baby too soon, felt contractions that shouldn't be happening yet ripping through her. Maggie worked with grim determination, administering tinctures to slow the labor, packing cloth to staunch the bleeding, murmuring instructions that Lydia couldn't quite hear through the roaring in her ears. Stay with me, girl. Breathe. Focus on my voice. The baby, still alive, still fighting. You fight too. Victor appeared with supplies, face stricken. Maggie put him to work immediately, heating water, preparing compresses, holding Lydia's hand when the contractions hit so hard she couldn't breathe. I've got you, he said over and over. I've got you. You're not alone. Lydia wanted to believe him. By mid-morning, the bleeding had slowed but not stopped. The contractions continued, irregular but strong. Too strong. Maggie pulled Victor aside. Lydia heard them through a haze of pain. Can't stop the labor completely. Too early, she said. I know, but if we don't let it happen, she could bleed out. It's a choice between maybe losing the baby or definitely losing both of them. No, Victor's voice cracked. There has to be another option. There isn't, not with what I have here. Maggie's voice was iron. So you decide. Right now, do I try to hold off labor and risk Lydia dying, or do I help the baby come early and fight for them both? Silence. Then Lydia's voice, weak but clear. Let the baby come. They both turned to look at her. It's my choice, Lydia said, each word an effort. And I choose us both living over both of us dying. Let the baby come. Victor crossed to her, took her face in both hands. Are you sure? No? But I'm decided. She managed something like a smile. Equal voices, remember? This is mine. He kissed her forehead, and Lydia saw tears on his cheeks. Then Maggie was there, brisk and focused. All right. Then we deliver this baby. Victor, I need you strong. No falling apart. Lydia will need you. I'm here. Then let's begin. The labor was brutal. Hours of pain that blurred together. Lydia lost track of time, lost track of everything except Maggie's voice guiding her and Victor's hand anchoring her. Push. Can't. You can. You will. Again. Now. She pushed until she thought she'd split apart. Pushed until there was nothing left but the pushing. And then, impossibly, a sound. A cry. Thin and reedy, but unmistakably alive. It's a boy, Maggie said, and Lydia heard wonder in the old woman's voice. Small, too small, but breathing. Victor made a sound like something between a laugh and a sob. Lydia felt hands place a tiny, squirming bundle on her chest. She looked down through exhausted tears at the smallest human she'd ever seen. Red-faced, wrinkled, eyes squeezed shut, hands the size of her thumb curled into fists. Hello, she whispered. Hello, little one. The baby's cry softened at her voice. He knows you, Victor said, voice thick with emotion. He already knows you. Maggie was working between Lydia's legs, dealing with the afterbirth and continued bleeding. Not out of danger yet. Either of them. The baby needs warmth, feeding every hour, constant watching, and Lydia needs rest and healing. This isn't over. But they're alive, Victor said. For now, keep them that way. The next week existed in a strange, suspended bubble. The baby, they named him James, after no one in particular, just because Lydia liked the sound, was so small he fit in one of Victor's hands. He couldn't regulate his own temperature. Couldn't suck properly. Spent most of his time sleeping against Lydia's chest, skin to skin, fighting for every breath. Lydia barely slept. When she did, Victor took over, holding the tiny infant against his own chest, murmuring stories about everything and nothing, watching for any sign of distress. Maggie came twice daily, checking both mother and baby, adjusting care, teaching Victor how to help feed James with a tiny spoon when he wouldn't latch. The village women brought food, left it at the door without demanding entry, giving them space, giving them privacy for this fragile, terrifying beginning. On the 5th day, James opened his eyes and looked directly at Lydia. She burst into tears. "He's really here," she said to Victor, who was heating milk for feeding. "He's really alive. He's a fighter." Victor crossed to them, looking down at his son with something like awe. "Like his mother. Like both his parents," Lydia corrected. Victor met her eyes and something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition, respect, the beginning of something that might become partnership. "We should send word," Victor said quietly, "to the estate, to society, about James." Lydia tensed. "Why?" "Because he's my heir, legally, regardless of the medical impossibility." Victor sat beside her on the bed. "And because if we don't control the narrative, someone else will." "What narrative?" "That he's mine, that I claim him, that any whispers about illegitimacy are just that, whispers." He reached out, let James wrap one tiny fist around his finger. "I won't let anyone question his legitimacy, or yours." Lydia felt something crack open in her chest. "You do that? Publicly? Even knowing, especially knowing?" Victor looked at her steadily. "This is my son. You are my wife. And anyone who says different will answer to me." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Lydia reached across the small space between them and kissed him. Quick, soft, a promise of possibility. When she pulled back, Victor was smiling, real and unguarded. "We're going to be all right," he said, "all three of us." Lydia looked down at James, felt his tiny chest rise and fall against hers, and chose to believe it. But the world, as always, had other plans. The letter arrived on a cold morning in late February, delivered by private courier directly to Thornwick Manor. Victor opened it in the library while Lydia fed James. She watched his face go from puzzled to furious in the space of 3 sentences. "What is it?" Victor handed her the letter without speaking. It was from the Duchy Council. Formal, legal, vicious. Medical evidence of the Duke's sterility has raised serious questions regarding the legitimacy of the child. Paternity must be established through formal inquiry. Until such time as legitimacy is confirmed, the child cannot be recognized as heir. Duchess Hartwell's reputation and conduct will be subject to full investigation. Lydia read it twice, feeling ice spread through her veins. They're calling me an adulteress. They're questioning James's legitimacy. Victor's voice was deadly quiet, which amounts to the same thing. Can they do this? They're doing it. He stood, pacing like a caged animal. Someone leaked the physician's report. Someone wants to discredit us. Both of us. Who? My cousin, probably. Edward. He's next in line if James is declared illegitimate. Victor's hands clenched into fists. He's wanted the title for years. This is his opening. Lydia felt James shift against her chest, making small sounds. She looked down at her son, barely 2 weeks old, impossibly fragile, and felt rage crystallize into something sharp and focused. No. Victor stopped pacing. No what? No, they don't get to do this. Not to us. Not to him. Lydia stood carefully, cradling James. We fight back. How? The medical evidence is real. I can't father children. That's documented fact. Then we find different evidence. Lydia's mind was racing. Medical anomalies, misdiagnoses, cases where the impossible happened. There has to be precedent. And if there isn't, then we create doubt. We make them question their certainty. She looked at Victor with absolute conviction. I won't let them brand our son a bastard because science can't explain him. Will you? Victor stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time all over again. Then he smiled, fierce and dangerous. No, he said. I won't. Let's go to war. The library at Thornwick Manor became a war room. Victor spread maps across the table, not geographical ones, but social. Family trees, council member allegiances, financial ties. Who owed whom favors? Who held grudges? Who could be bought, threatened, or reasoned with? Lydia sat in the armchair nursing James, watching her husband transform into someone she'd never seen before. Strategic, ruthless, focused. Edward has 3 votes guaranteed, bud, Victor said, marking names. Lord Pemberton, Lady Ashford, and the bishop. They're his mother's family connections. What about the others? Undecided, which means vulnerable to persuasion. He circled another name. Lord Hastings is drowning in gambling debts. Lady Catherine's daughter needs a marriage match. Sir William wants a trade contract. Lydia shifted James to her other side. You're going to bribe them. I'm going to remind them where their interests lie. Victor looked up. This is how the game is played, Lydia. Everyone wants something. You just have to figure out what and deliver it faster than your opponent. And if that doesn't work? His expression went cold. Then we destroy Edward's credibility before he destroys ours. There was a ruthlessness in his voice that should have frightened her. Instead, Lydia felt something like relief. This was the man who could protect their family, not the polished duke who'd married her for appearances. This version, sharp and dangerous and entirely focused on winning. What do you need from me? She asked. Victor crossed to her, knelt beside the chair so they were eye level. I need you to be exactly who you are, not meek, not apologetic. When we face the council, you stand there with James and you dare them to call you a liar. They'll try. Let them. He touched her face gently. You've survived everything they could throw at you and come out stronger. They're going to underestimate you because you're a woman, because you've been exiled, because you chose medicine over ballrooms. That's their mistake. Lydia felt James's small hand curl against her skin. When do we leave? 3 days gives us time to prepare, to gather evidence, to make sure James is strong enough for travel. He's premature and tiny. He's not strong enough. I know, but we don't have a choice. Victor's voice was rough. If we don't appear before the council within the week, they'll rule against us by default. Edwards made sure of that. Lydia looked down at her son. 2 weeks old, barely 5 pounds, still learning how to breathe properly. The thought of taking him into that viper's nest of a city made her stomach turn, but the thought of losing him was worse. Then we prepare, she said firmly, and we win. Maggie was less enthusiastic about the plan. You're out of your mind, the old woman said flatly when Lydia explained. That baby's not ready for a journey. You're not ready for a journey. You're barely 3 weeks postpartum. I don't have a choice. You have a choice. You say no. You stay here. You tell those city vultures to come to you if they want answers. Lydia adjusted the sling holding James against her chest. They won't come. And if we don't appear, they'll declare James illegitimate and strip Victor of his heir. We can't let that happen. Maggie muttered something uncomplimentary about nobility and their priorities. Then she sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Someone needs to keep that baby alive while you two fight your political battles. Maggie started pulling jars from her shelves. I'll bring medicines, herbs for fever, infection, pain, everything we might need if he gets sick on the road. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait till we survive this fool's errand. They left Thornwick on a gray morning that threatened snow. Victor had arranged for a private carriage, well-sprung, heated with warming bricks, curtained for privacy. Maggie took one look at it and snorted. Fancy box on wheels. Won't help if the baby catches pneumonia. Then we'll make sure he doesn't, Lydia said, climbing in with James bundled in layers of blankets. The journey to the capital took 2 days. 2 days of constant vigilance. James nursed poorly, cried in thin wails that broke Lydia's heart, slept fitfully. Every time they stopped to rest the horses, Maggie checked his breathing, his color, his temperature. Still alive, she'd report each time. But fragile, real fragile. Victor spent the journey coaching Lydia. The council will try to rattle you. They'll ask invasive questions, imply things, make you defensive. I know. Don't defend, don't explain, just state facts. He handed her a folder. I've compiled medical cases, documented instances where fertility diagnoses were wrong, men told they were sterile who later fathered children. It's rare, but it happens. Lydia flipped through the papers. Case studies, physician testimonies, scientific journals. Will they accept this? Some will. Others won't care about evidence. They've already made up their minds. Those we ignore. We focus on the undecided. Victor leaned forward. The key is making them question their certainty. We don't have to prove James is mine. We just have to create enough doubt that they can't prove he isn't. That's a thin line. It's the line we have. They reached the capital as dusk fell on the second day. The city rose before them, all spires and smoke and stone. Lydia hadn't seen it in nearly a year. It felt both familiar and alien. The streets where she'd walked as a duchess. The society that had watched her fail. Now she was returning with a premature baby, a questionable marriage, and everything to lose. Victor had arranged rooms at a private townhouse, neutral territory, not his family estate. Safer. Less chance of spies and gossip. The house was smaller than what Lydia remembered from her old life, but comfortable, warm, secure. Maggie immediately claimed a room next to Lydia's. I'll be listening. If the baby cries, I'm coming through that wall. I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to. Maggie's expression softened. Let me help, girl. You're going to need all your strength for what's coming. That night, Lydia lay in an unfamiliar bed with James sleeping on her chest, listening to the city sounds outside. Carriages, voices, the distant clang of bells. Victor appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? Too much thinking. He came in, sat on the edge of the bed. Want to share? Lydia traced a finger along James's tiny back. What if we lose? What if they rule against us and take him? They won't take him. I won't let them. You might not have a choice. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, if the worst happens, if they rule James illegitimate, we leave. All of us. We go somewhere they can't touch us. France, maybe? Or America. Somewhere we can start over. Lydia looked at him in shock. You'd give up the title? Without hesitation. His voice was absolute. I lost you once because I chose pride over partnership. I won't make that mistake again. If it comes down to the duchy or our family, I choose family. Every time. Something in Lydia's chest cracked open. She reached for his hand, laced their fingers together. I hope it doesn't come to that. So do I. But if it does, we'll survive it. Together. James made a small sound, and they both looked down at him. So tiny, so vulnerable. So completely worth fighting for. Tomorrow, Victor said quietly. We face them tomorrow. Tomorrow, Lydia agreed. The council chambers were exactly as intimidating as Lydia remembered. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, a long table where 9 council members sat in judgment, oil portraits of previous dukes glowering from the walls. Lydia walked in with James in a sling against her chest, Maggie at her side, and Victor slightly behind. A deliberate choice. This was her fight as much as his. Edward Blackmore sat at the far end of the table. Mid-30s, handsome in a soft way, smile like poisoned honey. He stood when they entered. Cousin, how good of you to join us, and you've brought the child. The pause before child was deliberate, insulting. Lydia met his eyes and didn't flinch. His name is James, and he's here because you questioned his legitimacy. I thought you should see exactly who you're attacking. Murmurs around the table. Lord Hastings looked uncomfortable. Lady Catherine raised an eyebrow. The bishop frowned. No one is attacking anyone, Lord Pemberton said smoothly. We're simply seeking truth. The medical evidence regarding the Duke's condition raises reasonable questions. The medical evidence is incomplete, Victor interrupted. He placed the folder on the table. I've compiled cases of men diagnosed as sterile who later fathered children. Misdiagnoses happen. Medical science isn't infallible. Perhaps. Edward picked up the folder, barely glanced at it. But the royal physician examined you twice. His conclusions were definitive. Physicians have been definitively wrong before. True, but the timing is convenient, isn't it? Edward's smile sharpened. You divorce the Duchess for failure to produce an heir. She disappears into the countryside. Months later, she turns up pregnant. You reconcile. Suddenly, this child is presented as your legitimate son and heir. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Lydia felt rage build in her chest. Are you calling me an adulteress? I'm saying the circumstances raise questions. Then let me answer them. Lydia stepped forward. James stirred against her chest but didn't wake. I was never unfaithful. Not once. Not ever. There was no other man, no secret affair, no convenient lover in the countryside. Just me, trying to survive exile and a pregnancy I didn't expect. So you claim. Lady Ashford's voice was ice. But claims are not proof. What proof would satisfy you? Lydia's voice rose. A signed confession from every person in Thornwick that I never took a lover? A divine revelation? What exactly would convince you that a woman can tell the truth about her own body? Silence. Then Lord Hastings cleared his throat. The medical cases the Duke presented are compelling, if misdiagnosis is possible. If, Edward cut in. That's the issue. We're being asked to overturn established medical fact based on if. Victor's voice went cold. And you're asking us to accept slander based on suspicion. I'm asking for certainty, for proof. There is no proof, Lydia's voice cracked. That's the point. You can't prove a negative. I can't prove there wasn't another man any more than you can prove there was. So we're left with character, with history, with trust. She looked around the table. Some of you have known me for years. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever given you reason to question my integrity? More uncomfortable silence. Lady Catherine spoke for the first time. You make a fair point, Duchess. Character should count for something. Character can be performed, Edward said smoothly. We all wear masks in society. Is that what you're doing? Lydia turned on him. Performing concern for legitimacy while really just making a play for the title? Edward's expression flickered. That's a serious accusation. So is calling my son a bastard? The room erupted. Voices overlapping, council members arguing. The bishop calling for order. Edward standing, face flushed with anger. Through it all, James slept peacefully against Lydia's chest. Victor moved to her side, a solid presence. Enough, he said, voice cutting through the chaos. Here's what's going to happen. You have two options. Option 1. You accept the medical evidence I've presented, acknowledge that diagnoses can be wrong, and recognize James as my legitimate heir. And option 2, Lord Pemberton asked, you rule against us. Declare James illegitimate, strip him of inheritance. Victor's voice went deadly quiet. And I take my family and leave. Renounce the title. Let Edward have it. And you all get to explain to the kingdom why the Duke of Blackmore chose exile over submitting to a kangaroo court. Shocked silence. You wouldn't, Edward breathed. Try me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lady Catherine laughed, sharp and surprised. Well, that's certainly a bold strategy. It's the truth, Victor said. I spent 2 years letting pride and duty dictate my choices. It cost me my marriage and nearly cost me everything else. I won't make that mistake again. My family comes first. The title is secondary. That's not how nobility works, the bishop said stiffly. Then maybe it's time nobility worked differently. Lydia felt something like pride swell in her chest. This was the man she'd needed 2 years ago. This version who chose partnership over prestige. Lord Hastings spoke up, voice thoughtful. If the Duke renounces, the scandal would be significant. Perhaps we're being hasty. Hasty? Edward's voice rose. We're talking about the legitimacy of the duchy's heir. We're talking about a premature baby and exhausted parents who've been through hell, Lady Catherine corrected. Perhaps we should consider that medical mysteries do occasionally occur. You can't be serious. I am. Lady Catherine looked at Lydia. I've known you since you were presented at court, girl. You were many things, naive, sheltered, too soft for this world. But you were never dishonest. If you say there was no other man, I believe you." "Thank you," Lydia said quietly. The bishop shifted. "Medical anomalies are not unheard of. Perhaps in this case we should err on the side of mercy." Edward looked around the table, seeing his support crumbling. "This is ridiculous. The medical evidence is incomplete," Lord Hastings interrupted. "As the Duke said, I move that we recognize James Blackmore as legitimate heir, pending no further evidence to the contrary." "I second," Lady Catherine said immediately. "All in favor?" 6 hands went up. Edward stared at the raised hands like they'd betrayed him personally. "This is a mistake." "Noted," Lord Pemberton said dryly. "Motion carries. James Blackmore is recognized as legitimate heir to the duchy. This council is adjourned." Lydia felt her knees go weak. Victor caught her elbow, steadying her. They'd won. Not cleanly, not convincingly, but they'd won. Edward stood abruptly, chair scraping. "This isn't over." "Yes," Victor said coldly. "It is. And if you come after my family again, cousin, you'll find I can be significantly less civilized than I've been today." Edward's face went white with fury. Then he turned and stalked from the chambers. After he left, the remaining council members dispersed quickly. Lady Catherine paused beside Lydia. "That was well done, both of you. Thank you for your support. Don't thank me yet. Edward's right about one thing. This isn't over. He'll regroup, find another angle." She looked down at James. "Keep that baby close and your guard up." Then she too was gone, leaving Lydia and Victor alone in the empty chamber. Lydia sagged against him, suddenly exhausted. "We won. For now." "Can't you just enjoy the victory?" Victor wrapped an arm around her. "I will, once we're safely away from here." But leaving proved harder than staying. Word of the council's decision spread through society like wildfire. By evening, invitations flooded the townhouse. Requests for visits, dinner parties, social calls. Everyone suddenly wanted to see the Duchess, who'd returned from exile with a miracle baby. "We're not going," Lydia said, tossing another invitation in the fire. Victor caught her hand. "We have to go to some. Show unity. Prove we're not hiding. James is 3 weeks old. I know, but if we disappear now, the gossip will be worse. People will assume we're ashamed, that we know James is illegitimate and we're running." Lydia looked at him with frustration. "So we parade our premature infant around ballrooms to satisfy society's curiosity? No. We make 2 appearances, carefully chosen. Show our faces. Let people see James is healthy. He's not healthy. He's fragile and tiny, and he's alive. He's ours. And we're not going to hide him like he's something to be ashamed of." Victor's voice softened. "I know you're scared. I am too, but we need to control the narrative. 2 events. Then we go home to Thornwick and never come back if you don't want to." Lydia looked down at James, sleeping in the bassinet Maggie had insisted they bring. So small, so vulnerable. But Victor was right. Hiding would confirm suspicions. They needed to be seen, to be visible, to dare society to question them. 2 events, she said finally, and Maggie comes with us. Agreed. The first event was a dinner at Lord Hastings' estate, small, intimate, strategically chosen. Only council members and their immediate families. A chance to shore up the fragile support they'd gained. Lydia wore a dress that had been let out to accommodate her post-pregnancy body. Nothing fit right anymore. Everything felt too tight or too loose. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger, softer, tired, milk-stained. "You look beautiful," Victor said from the doorway. "I look exhausted." "You look like a mother who fought the council and won." He crossed to her, adjusted her necklace. "That's more impressive than any ball gown beauty." Maggie appeared with James bundled in her arms. "He's fed, changed, should sleep through most of dinner if you're lucky. And if we're not lucky, then I'll handle it. You 2 focus on politics. I'll handle the baby." The dinner was excruciating. Polite conversation that barely masked intense curiosity. Questions phrased as concern. Compliments that felt like assessments. Everyone watching, everyone judging. Lady Catherine was the only genuine presence. She held James with practiced ease. She had 5 children of her own, and pronounced him perfect. Small, yes, but strong. You can see it in his grip. She smiled at Lydia. He'll be fine. They're tougher than they look. I hope so. Trust a mother of 5. He'll be running you ragged in no time. Halfway through dinner, James woke and began crying. Not the small mewling sounds of a newborn, full-throated wails that cut through conversation. Lydia was out of her seat immediately. I should go, Victor said. I'll make apologies. She escaped to the sitting room where Maggie was already trying to soothe James. He won't settle, Maggie said, frustration creeping in. Fed him 20 minutes ago. He's not wet. Don't know what's wrong. Lydia took him, and his cries intensified. She felt panic rise. Something was wrong. This wasn't normal fussiness. She unwrapped the blankets, checking his body. His skin felt too warm, flushed, his breathing too fast. He's feverish. Maggie pressed a hand to his forehead. You're right. Came on fast, too. We need to leave. Now. Victor appeared in the doorway. What's wrong? James is sick. We need to get back to the townhouse. To his credit, Victor didn't argue. Didn't worry about appearances or social obligations. I'll bring the carriage around. They left within minutes, James wailing in Lydia's arms, Maggie gathering supplies. Back at the townhouse, Maggie went into healer mode, checking vitals, mixing tinctures, laying cool cloths on James's small body. Fever's high, but not dangerous yet. Could be anything. Reaction to travel, early infection, just his body being fragile. What do we do? Watch him, keep him cool, get fluids in him, and pray it doesn't get worse. It got worse. By midnight, James's fever had spiked. He wouldn't nurse, wouldn't settle, just cried in thin, weak sounds that shredded Lydia's heart. By 2 a.m, his breathing turned raspy. By 4, he was barely conscious. Lydia sat in the rocking chair, James limp against her chest, tears streaming down her face. He's dying. He's not dying. Maggie's voice was firm. But he's in trouble. We need a physician, a real one. Victor was already moving toward the door. I'll get Dr. Morrison. He's the best in the city. He's also the one who examined you, Lydia said. The one who said you were sterile. I don't care. He's the best. That's what matters. He left, and Lydia was alone with Maggie and James and the crushing weight of helplessness. Talk to him, Maggie said. Babies know their mother's voice. Keep him fighting. So Lydia talked, told him about Thornwick, about the village, about the life they'd build together, about how much she needed him to survive. You're not allowed to give up, she whispered fiercely. You hear me? You fought to be born. You fight to stay alive. James's breathing rattled in response. Dr. Morrison arrived at dawn, older man, gray-haired, carrying a worn medical bag. He took one look at James and his expression went grave. How long has he been like this? Fever started yesterday evening, got worse overnight. Morrison examined James with practiced hands, listening to his chest, checking his color, taking his temperature. His lungs are congested, early pneumonia, I suspect. In a full-term infant, I'd be concerned. In one this premature. He looked at Lydia with something like pity. I'm sorry. The prognosis is poor. Lydia felt the room tilt. No. I can try treatments, steam, herbal preparations, but at his size, his lungs aren't strong enough to fight this kind of infection. Then make them strong enough. I can't, I'm sorry. Sometimes there's nothing medical science can do. Victor grabbed the doctor's arm. Try anyway. Everything you have, cost doesn't matter. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll do what I can. For the next 12 hours, they battled for James's life. Steam treatments every hour, herbal poultices on his tiny chest, drops of medicine on his tongue, constant monitoring. Lydia didn't leave his side. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just held him and willed him to breathe. Victor brought her water, food she didn't touch, blankets she didn't feel. Maggie mixed medicines with shaking hands, looking older than Lydia had ever seen her. And James, tiny, fragile James, fought. His breathing would ease, then worsen. His fever would drop, then spike. Caught in a terrible rhythm of progress and relapse. By evening, Dr. Morrison looked defeated. "I've done everything I know to do." "It's not enough," Lydia said. "I know. I'm sorry." He left, and Lydia was alone with her dying son. She laid him on the bed, unwrapped all the blankets so she could see his whole small body, ribs showing through translucent skin, hands curled into weak fists, chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate movements. "You can't leave me," she whispered. "I won't allow it. Do you hear me? I won't allow it." James's eyes opened, just barely, and looked at her. For a moment, everything else fell away. The fear, the exhaustion, the overwhelming grief. Just mother and son, looking at each other. "Fight," Lydia breathed. "Please, just keep fighting." James's tiny hand moved, fingers stretching toward her. She took his hand in hers, felt his impossibly small fingers wrap around her thumb, and in that moment she felt something shift. Not dramatic, not miraculous, just a subtle change in the quality of his breathing, a slight easing of the congestion. "Maggie," Lydia called, voice sharp. "Listen." The old woman came over, pressed her ear to James's chest. A long pause, then, "The rattle's different, looser. He's clearing it." "He's clearing it? Don't get excited yet. Could just be temporary." But Maggie's hands were gentle as she examined him. "Keep him upright. Keep the steam going. He's not safe yet. But he's fighting," Lydia sobbed, relief and terror and exhaustion all mixed together. Victor appeared, face haggard. "What's happening?" "He's fighting," Lydia managed. "Our son is fighting." They spent the night in shifts, Victor holding James upright while Lydia dozed. Maggie preparing treatments, then switching, moving in careful rotation. By morning, James's breathing had definitely improved. Not normal, but better. Clearer. By afternoon, his fever had dropped. By evening, he nursed, weakly, but he nursed. Dr. Morrison returned at dusk, expecting to find them preparing a funeral. Instead, he found James sleeping peacefully in Lydia's arms. The doctor examined him in silence, then sat back, shaking his head. "I don't understand it. Last night he was dying." "Last night he was fighting," Lydia corrected. "And he won." Morrison looked at her with something like wonder. "You did it. Somehow, you did it." "We all did it." Lydia looked at Victor, at Maggie. Together. The doctor packed his bag slowly. At the door, he paused. "The Duke asked me here to treat the child, but I also need to apologize for my earlier diagnosis, about his fertility." Victor tensed. "Why?" "Because clearly I was wrong." Morrison gestured at James. "That's your son. I don't care what my examination said. That child has your stubbornness, your will to survive." He met Victor's eyes. "Sometimes the body finds a way. I should have allowed for that possibility." After he left, Lydia and Victor sat in stunned silence. "He believes," Victor said finally. "He believes." They looked at James, sleeping peacefully now, breathing easily, color returning to his small face. "We need to leave the city," Lydia said. "Tomorrow, before anything else can go wrong." "Agreed. We go home." "To Thornwick?" Victor nodded. "To Thornwick, where we're safe, where James can grow strong without society watching every breath." "What about the second event? The appearances you said we needed to make?" "Forget them." Victor took her hand. "You were right before. Our son's life is more important than society's opinion." Lydia felt something unclench in her chest. "Then we go home." But before they could leave, one final crisis arrived. The next morning, as they were packing, a message came. Edward Blackmore requested an audience. "No," Lydia said immediately. "He says it's urgent," the messenger insisted. "Regarding the council's decision." Victor's expression went cold. "Tell him we're leaving the city. If he wants to talk, he can write a letter." "He said you'd refuse. He asked me to give you this." The messenger handed over a sealed envelope. Victor opened it, read quickly. His face went white. "What?" Lydia demanded. Wordlessly, he handed her the letter. It was short, direct, devastating. "I have evidence that will overturn the council's decision. Meet me at the Blackmore estate at noon, or I present it to the council this afternoon. Your choice." Lydia looked up at Victor. What evidence could he possibly have? "I don't know, but if he presents it to the council without us there to defend ourselves..." Victor's jaw tightened. "We have to go." "It could be a trap." "Probably is, but we can't risk ignoring it." Maggie appeared in the doorway. "I'll stay with James. You two do what you need to do." Lydia looked at her son, sleeping in the bassinet, still fragile, still recovering. "We shouldn't both go," she said. "One of us should stay with him." "No." Victor's voice was firm. "We face this together, both of us. That's what we agreed." So at noon they arrived at the Blackmore estate, the grand house Lydia had once called home and now felt like hostile territory. Edward was waiting in the study. He looked pleased with himself, smug. "Thank you for coming." "What evidence?" Victor said without preamble. "Show us or we leave." Edward smiled and pulled a paper from his desk. "A witness statement from a farmer in Thornwick says he saw the Duchess in compromising circumstances with a traveling merchant last summer, right around the time the child would have been conceived." Lydia felt ice flood her veins. "That's a lie." "Is it? The man was very specific. Dates, details, location." "Who?" Victor demanded. "Give me his name." "And let you threaten him? I don't think so." Edward set the paper down. "But I'm prepared to make this disappear. For a price." "Of course." "Blackmail." "What do you want?" Lydia asked, voice cold. "Victor renounces James as his heir, acknowledges him as illegitimate, and I become next in line again." "Absolutely not." "Then I take this to the council. They'll overturn their decision. James will be declared a bastard, and you'll both be ruined." Edward leaned back, confident. "Your choice." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Victor started laughing. Not fake laughter. Real, deep, genuine amusement. Edward's confidence flickered. "What's funny?" "You are." Victor wiped his eyes. "You actually think we'll fall for this?" "It's a sworn statement. It's fiction, poorly researched fiction." Victor crossed his arms. "Lydia never left Thornwick Manor's grounds last summer. She was too sick, too exhausted, too pregnant. Ask anyone in the village, they'll confirm it." "One farmer's word against the village's," Edward said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Except your farmer doesn't exist, does he?" Lydia stepped forward. "You made him up. Invented a story you thought we couldn't disprove, but you made a mistake." "What mistake?" "I know every person in Thornwick, every farmer, every merchant, every child. I've treated most of them medically. If you produce this mysterious witness, I'll know immediately if he's real or bought." Lydia's voice went hard. "So go ahead. Present your evidence. Let us question this farmer under oath. See how long his story holds up." Edward's face flushed. "You're bluffing. Try me." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Edward's composure cracked. "You think you've won. But this isn't over. I'll find real evidence, real witnesses. I'll destroy you both." "No," Victor said quietly. "You won't. Because if you come after my family again, with lies or truth or anything in between, I will ruin you. Not legally, not politically, financially, socially, completely." He leaned forward. "I have resources you can't imagine, connections you don't know about. And I will dedicate every one of them to making sure you never recover. Do you understand?" Edward had gone pale. "You wouldn't." "I would. For them?" Victor glanced at Lydia, without hesitation. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Finally, Edward looked away, beaten. "Get out of my house!" They left without another word. Outside, Lydia took Victor's arm, and they walked to the carriage in silence. Only when they were safely inside, moving away from the estate, did Lydia speak. "Would you really ruin him?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. Lydia looked at her husband, this man who'd thrown her away and then fought to get her back, who'd faced down councils and cousins for their family, and felt something that might have been love, or might have been respect, or might have been both. "Let's go home," she said. "To Thornwick?" "To Thornwick." But as their carriage rolled toward the townhouse where James and Maggie waited, neither of them saw the figure watching from a window of the Blackmore estate. Edward Blackmore stood in the shadows, face twisted with rage, holding a letter he hadn't shown them. A real letter. From a physician willing to testify that Victor's sterility diagnosis was fabricated. Not because it was true, but because Edward had paid him enough to lie. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. They made it back to Thornwick 3 days later, traveling slowly because James still tired easily. Lydia kept him wrapped against her chest the entire journey, refusing to let him out of her arms except for feeding and changing. Every cough, every small sound sent her heart racing. Victor noticed but didn't comment, just stayed close, one hand always touching either her or the baby, like he was afraid they'd vanish if he looked away. When the manor finally came into view, shabby and crumbling and home, Lydia felt something in her chest loosen. "We made it." "We did." Victor helped her down from the carriage. "Now we rest, recover, figure out our next move." But rest proved impossible. Word of their return spread through the village within hours. By evening, a delegation appeared at the manor's front door. Brennan, the woman from the well whose name Lydia had learned was Martha, the blacksmith, 2 farmers, and a handful of others. Brennan spoke first. "We heard what happened in the city, the council, the accusations." Lydia tensed. "News travels fast." "It does when merchants gossip." Martha stepped forward. "We came to say it doesn't matter what those city folk believe. We know you, know what kind of person you are, and we know that baby's yours and the Duke's. Medical reports be damned." Something hot pressed behind Lydia's eyes. "Thank you." "More than that," the blacksmith added. "If anyone comes here asking questions, trying to dig up dirt, they'll get nothing from us. You helped our families, saved our children. We don't forget that." Victor appeared in the doorway behind Lydia. "We appreciate your support." The blacksmith looked him up and down, assessing. "You seem different than when you first showed up. Less of an ass." Victor actually smiled. "I'm working on it. Keep working. Your wife's too good for an ass." The blacksmith tipped his hat. "Welcome home, Your Grace. Both of you." After they left, Lydia leaned against Victor, exhausted. "They accepted us. They accepted you. I'm still on probation." But his voice was warm. Smart people, honestly. That night, after James was asleep in the cradle Victor had built, crude but sturdy, they sat in the library trying to plan. "Edward won't stop," Victor said. "He'll find another angle, another attack. So we stay one step ahead." Lydia pulled out paper. "We need allies, real ones. People who'll stand with us if Edward brings more accusations." "Who did you have in mind?" "Dr. Morrison, for one. He admitted he was wrong about your diagnosis. If he's willing to say that publicly—" "He won't," Victor interrupted. "He'd be admitting professional failure. That could ruin his reputation. Then we find other physicians, build a medical case that infertility diagnoses aren't absolute." Lydia started making notes. "We document everything about James, his growth, his development. We show he's thriving despite the premature birth. We make it impossible to claim he's anything but ours." Victor watched her write, something like admiration in his expression. "You've gotten strategic. I've gotten desperate. There's a difference." "I'm not sure there is. Not anymore." Over the next weeks, they built their case methodically. Victor traveled to nearby cities, meeting with physicians, collecting case studies, building a network of medical professionals willing to question the absoluteness of sterility diagnoses. Lydia stayed in Thornwick, documenting James's progress with almost obsessive detail. His weight gain, slow but steady, his feeding schedule, his sleep patterns, his responses to stimuli. Everything that proved he was a healthy, developing child. Maggie helped, adding her own observations from a healer's perspective. "Boy's got his father's stubbornness. She noted one afternoon while examining James. See how he grabs? That's determination. That's fight. Can you document that? Lydia asked. What? That he's stubborn? That he shows characteristics consistent with his father. Anything that supports the connection. Maggie gave her a look. You're really going to war with this, aren't you? I'm protecting my family. If that requires war, so be it. By March, James was 2 months old and significantly stronger. Still small, he'd likely always be small given his premature start, but alert, responsive, meeting developmental milestones. He could track objects with his eyes, grip fingers, make small sounds that weren't quite words but were definitely communication. Victor was besotted. He'd spend hours just watching the baby, talking to him in a soft voice Lydia had never heard him use before. You're going to be strong, he'd tell James. Stronger than I was. Better than I was. You'll have choices I never had. He's 2 months old, Lydia would say, amused. He can't understand you. He will eventually. I'm practicing. It was absurdly domestic, absurdly normal, and Lydia found herself falling into it. This rhythm of feeding and changing and the endless exhaustion of new parenthood mixed with the constant background tension of waiting for Edward's next attack, which came in early April. A letter arrived, delivered by official courier, not to Victor, to Lydia directly. She opened it in the library, James asleep in her lap. It was a summons. From the Royal Physicians Board, requesting her presence in the capital to answer questions regarding irregularities in the documentation of the heir's birth and legitimacy. Lydia read it twice, feeling cold spread through her chest. This was Edward's doing. He'd gone over the council's head straight to the medical establishment. Victor found her an hour later, still sitting with the letter in her hand. What's wrong? She showed him. He read it, expression darkening. He's trying to force your hand, make you appear before a medical board without me there to defend you. Can he do that? Apparently. Victor crumpled the letter. We'll fight it. I'll hire lawyers. No. Lydia's voice was calm, decided. I'll go. Absolutely not. Think about it, Victor. If I refuse, it looks like I'm hiding something. But if I appear, answer their questions, present our documentation. She gestured at the stacks of notes she'd been keeping. I show them I have nothing to hide. They'll tear you apart. Then I'll put myself back together. Lydia met his eyes. I've done harder things. I've survived exile, delivered a premature baby, fought off pneumonia. I can handle some doctors asking questions. Victor looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time again. You're serious? Completely. Then I'm coming with you. No, you stay with James. Someone has to, and he needs his father. Lydia stood carefully, shifting the sleeping baby. I'll take Maggie. She can speak to the medical aspects, and I'll take our documentation, all of it. Lydia. We knew this would happen eventually. Edward was never going to accept defeat quietly. She touched Victor's face. So I go to the capital. I face them. And I prove that our son is exactly who we say he is. Victor caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. You're terrifying, you know that? Good. They should be terrified of me. She left for the capital 2 days later with Maggie, a trunk full of documentation, and a determination that felt like armor. Victor stayed behind with James, looking miserable. Keep him safe, Lydia said at the carriage. Keep yourself safe, Victor countered. I'll try. The hearing was held in a sterile chamber in the Royal Medical College. 5 physicians sat behind a long table, all men, all older, all looking at Lydia like she was a curiosity rather than a person. The head physician, Dr. Aldrich, spoke first. Duchess Hartwell, thank you for appearing. Did I have a choice? We simply have questions, irregularities that need clarification. Then ask your questions. Dr. Aldrich opened a folder. You claim to have been pregnant by Duke Blackmore despite his documented sterility, correct? I don't claim. I was pregnant. I gave birth. The baby is his. The medical evidence suggests that's impossible. Then the medical evidence is incomplete. Lydia pulled out her own folder. I've compiled cases, 17 of them, where men diagnosed as sterile later fathered children. Misdiagnoses happen. Medical science has limitations. She slid the documentation across the table. The physicians exchanged glances. One of them, younger, brown-haired, picked up the papers and started reading. "These are compelling," he said slowly. "They're facts," Lydia corrected. "Not speculation. Documented cases with physician testimony." "Even so," Dr. Aldrich said, "the circumstances of your pregnancy remain suspicious. You were exiled, isolated, living without supervision. I was living in Thornwick-on-Marsh, a village of 300 people. Everyone knew where I was every moment of every day." Lydia's voice hardened. "If you're implying I took a lover, produce him. Give me a name, a witness. Anything beyond speculation." Silence. "You can't," Lydia continued, "because there wasn't anyone. There was no affair, no secret lover, just a woman trying to survive and a pregnancy that shouldn't have been possible, but was." "Science doesn't work on shouldn't," another physician said stiffly. "Then science needs to expand its understanding." Maggie spoke up from beside Lydia. "I've been a healer for 50 years, delivered more babies than you lot combined. And I'll tell you, bodies don't follow rules like you think they do. They surprise you. They adapt. They find ways. Folk medicine is what keeps people alive when fancy doctors can't." Maggie stood, eyes flashing. "I examined that girl throughout her pregnancy. I delivered that baby. I watched him fight through pneumonia at 3 weeks old. And I'm telling you, he's the Duke's son. I'd stake my reputation on it." "Your reputation as a village healer?" Doctor. Aldrich's tone was dismissive. "My reputation as someone who knows more about birth and life and survival than you ever will from your books and theories." The room went quiet. Then the young physician spoke up. "I'd like to examine the documentation more thoroughly, the case studies, if there's genuine precedent for diagnostic error." "There isn't enough precedent to overturn established medical fact," Dr. Aldrich interrupted. "But there's enough to create reasonable doubt," the young physician countered. "Which seems to be the actual question here. Not certainty, just doubt." "The legitimacy of a duchy heir requires more than doubt. The legitimacy of a duchy heir requires evidence of illegitimacy," Lydia cut in, "which you don't have. You have a diagnosis that might be wrong. You have a pregnancy that seems impossible, but you don't have proof of infidelity. You don't have witnesses to an affair. You don't have anything except suspicion." She stood, gathering her papers. "So unless you plan to call me a liar based solely on the fact that I accomplished something medical science says I shouldn't have, I think we're done here." Dr. Aldrich's face flushed. "This board hasn't dismissed you." "No, but I'm dismissing myself." Lydia looked at each physician in turn. "You wanted to intimidate me, make me defensive, force me to prove something that can't be proven. I'm not playing that game. My son is legitimate, I know it. My husband knows it. And anyone with sense knows it. If you want to rule otherwise, you do it on your conscience, not mine." She walked out with Maggie at her heels, leaving 5 stunned physicians in her wake. Outside, Maggie let out a low whistle. "Girl, you just told the Royal Medical Board to go to hell. I told them the truth. If they can't handle it, that's their problem. You know they might rule against you anyway, out of pride if nothing else. Then we'll deal with it." Lydia felt surprisingly calm. "But I'm done defending myself to people who've already made up their minds." They stayed in the city for 3 days waiting for the board's decision. 3 agonizing days of not knowing if she'd just destroyed everything or saved it. Victor sent daily letters asking about James. Maggie responded with updates. The baby was fine, eating well, growing, missing his mother. Lydia missed him with an ache that felt physical. On the 3rd day, the decision came. A messenger delivered it to the townhouse where they were staying. Lydia opened it with shaking hands. The board had ruled, inconclusively, not for them, not against them, just inconclusive. They acknowledged the case studies Lydia had presented, acknowledged that diagnostic error was possible, but refused to definitively declare James legitimate without more evidence, which meant everything stayed in legal limbo. Lydia read it 3 times, feeling fury build. "Cowards," she spat. "They won't rule against us because they can't prove illegitimacy. But they won't rule for us because it would mean admitting error. So what happens now? Maggie asked. I don't know. Lydia crumpled the paper. We're stuck, not vindicated, not condemned, just stuck. But when they returned to Thornwick 2 days later, something had changed. Victor met them at the manor, James in his arms, looking exhausted and relieved. How bad? He asked. Inconclusive. They refused to rule either way. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we're still fighting. Apparently. There's something else. He handed her a letter. This came while you were gone, from Lady Catherine. Lydia opened it, read quickly, and felt her eyebrows rise. Lady Catherine had written to several prominent families, sharing her support for Lydia and James, had hosted a social gathering where she'd publicly defended the legitimacy of the heir, had in essence used her considerable social influence to shift the narrative. The letter ended with a simple line. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Stop defending. Start attacking. She's right, Lydia said slowly. About what? We've been playing defense, responding to Edward's attacks, answering accusations. But what if we went on offense instead? Victor looked intrigued. What did you have in mind? We stop trying to prove James is legitimate. We make Edward prove he's not. Lydia started pacing. We demand he produces evidence, his witnesses, his proof. We put him on trial instead of us. The council won't agree to that. Then we go around the council, to society, to the public. Lydia's mind was racing now. We host gatherings. We let people meet James, see him, see us as a family. We make it socially unacceptable to question his legitimacy. Maggie nodded slowly. Make it so anyone who attacks the baby looks like they're attacking a child, not a legal heir. A child. Exactly. Lydia looked at Victor. Can we do that? He thought for a moment, then smiled, sharp and dangerous. We can, and we should, but not here, not in Thornwick. Where then? The summer estate. The one between here and the capital. Neutral ground. Close enough to the city that society can visit easily. Far enough that we control the environment. We don't have a summer estate. We do now. I'll buy one. Victor shifted James to his other arm. We host a series of gatherings. Small, intimate. Invite council members. Influential families. People whose opinions matter. We let them see James. Let them see us. And we dare them to call us liars to our faces. Lydia felt something like hope kindle. That could work. It will work, because we'll make it work. Over the next month, Victor acquired an estate. Smaller than his family holding, but elegant, well-maintained, perfect for hosting. They moved in with James, Maggie, and a small staff Victor hired from the village. The transformation was deliberate. Not the Grand Duke and his Duchess. Not nobility demanding respect, just a family living quietly, raising their son. The invitations went out in May. Not formal summonses, gentle requests. Would Lady Catherine like to visit for tea? Would Lord Hastings enjoy a weekend in the country? Would the bishop appreciate a quiet retreat? Most accepted. Curiosity, probably. Or political calculation. Either way, they came. Lady Catherine arrived first, sweeping in with her usual brisk efficiency. Let me see this miracle baby everyone's fighting over. Lydia brought James out, 4 months old now, starting to smile, grabbing at everything within reach. Catherine held him expertly, examining him like she was assessing livestock. Then she smiled. He's got Victor's scowl, see? Right there when he's concentrating? That's pure Blackmore stubbornness. You think so? I know so. I've seen that expression on 3 generations of Blackmore men. She handed James back. Anyone who says he's not Victor's is either blind or lying. Will you say that publicly? I already have, at my gathering last month, and I'll say it again. Catherine's expression softened. You've been through hell, girl. You came out stronger. That's worth supporting. Over the next weeks, others came. Lord Hastings, who played with James and commented on how the baby had Victor's hands, long fingers, the same shape. The young physician from the medical board, who examined James with Lydia's permission and wrote a detailed report confirming normal development. Even the bishop, who held James awkwardly but pronounced him clearly blessed, which Lydia chose to interpret as support. Each visit was carefully orchestrated, casual, warm, human, not a political performance, just parents sharing their child with guests. And slowly the narrative shifted. Gossip in the city changed tone. Not, is the heir legitimate, but have you seen the baby? He's adorable. Society publications ran pieces about the young family at the summer estate. Illustrations of Lydia in the garden with James, Victor teaching the baby to grasp a rattle. The message was clear. This was a real family. Not a scandal, not a political maneuver, just a mother, father, and baby. Edward must have noticed, because in late June he made his move. The letter arrived via courier addressed to Victor. I'm prepared to drop all challenges to James's legitimacy. In exchange, you cede the northern properties to me and guarantee I remain your heir should anything happen to James. It was a confession of defeat wrapped in negotiation. Victor read it aloud to Lydia in their sitting room. He's trying to salvage something. What do you want to do? Victor looked at James, who was attempting to fit his entire fist in his mouth. I want to tell him to go to hell, but the northern properties are valuable, and guaranteeing him succession if James doesn't survive. He stopped, like the thought was too painful to finish. It's insurance, Lydia said quietly. For him. He's admitting he can't prove James is illegitimate, but he wants security, a guarantee that he's not completely cut out. You think we should accept? Lydia thought about it, about the months of fighting, the constant attacks, the exhaustion. I think we should counteroffer. He drops all challenges permanently, in writing, with penalties if he breaks the agreement. In exchange, you guarantee his succession only if James dies before producing an heir of his own, and he gets one northern property, not all of them. Victor smiled slowly. That's brilliant. It protects us, but gives him something, makes him think he won a concession. More importantly, it ends this, publicly. No more questions, no more fights. They sent the counteroffer that afternoon. Edward accepted within 2 days. The agreement was drawn up, signed, witnessed by the council. Just like that, the war was over. Not with a dramatic confrontation, not with vindication or apology, just a legal document and mutual exhaustion. When the signed agreement arrived, Lydia held it in her hands and felt nothing but tired relief. It's done, she said to Victor. It's done, he agreed. They burned the original accusations in the fireplace that night, watching the papers curl and blacken. We should celebrate, Victor said. I'm too exhausted to celebrate. Then we'll sleep, and tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. What came next was autumn in Thornwick. They returned to the manor in September, but it was different this time. Victor had arranged for repairs. New roof, fixed windows, restored heating. The house was still old, still shabby in places, but it was warm and sound and theirs. James was 6 months old, babbling nonsense, sitting up on his own, fascinated by everything. Lydia resumed her healing work in the village, but now with Victor's full support. He'd built her a proper clinic, small building, well-supplied, clean. You're serious about this, she'd said when he showed it to her. You're serious about this. I'm just supporting what matters to you. The village accepted it readily. They'd always accepted Lydia. Now they cautiously accepted Victor too. He's less terrible than expected, Brennan admitted one evening at the tavern. I'll take that as high praise, Victor had responded. By October, something had shifted fundamentally. Lydia and Victor weren't performing marriage anymore, weren't trying to be what society expected. They were just partners, fighting over whose turn it was to deal with James's night crying, collaborating on estate management, disagreeing about village politics, making decisions together. Real, messy, honest. One night, Lydia woke to find Victor gone from bed. She found him in James's room, standing over the crib, just watching their son sleep. What are you doing? He didn't look away from James, making sure he's real, that this is real. It's real. I know, but sometimes I still can't believe it, that I almost lost this. That I almost threw you away because I couldn't see past my own pride. Lydia came to stand beside him. You didn't throw me away, you let me go. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because if you'd held on, I would have stayed that person you married. Soft, uncertain, breakable. She touched his arm. Being let go gave me space to become who I actually am. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for who I became because of it. Victor looked at her finally. Who did you become? Someone strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you, not in front of you, beside you. He kissed her then, not passionate, just honest. A promise that felt like partnership. When they pulled apart, James made a small sound in his sleep. They both looked down at him, this impossible child who'd changed everything. We did it, Victor said quietly. We actually did it. We survived, Lydia corrected. That's different than winning. Is it? Yes. Winning implies there was a clear victory. We just didn't lose. We kept going until the other side got tired. I'll take it. The official recognition came in November. A letter from the council, countersigned by the king himself. James Blackmore is hereby recognized as legitimate heir to the Duchy of Blackmore. All questions regarding his parentage are considered settled. It was bureaucratic, formal, bloodless. But it was final. Lydia read it twice, then handed it to Victor. We won. We survived, he corrected, echoing her earlier words. That's better than winning. They framed the letter and hung it in the library at Thornwick Manor, not as a trophy, as a reminder of what they'd fought for, what they'd survived, what they'd become. That winter was brutal, snow and ice and bitter cold, but inside the manor there was warmth. James learned to crawl, getting into everything, requiring constant supervision. Lydia's healing practice grew. She started training a younger woman from the village, passing on what Maggie had taught her. Victor split his time between estate management and family, finding a balance that had always eluded him before. And slowly, tentatively, they built something that looked like happiness, not perfect. James got sick with a minor cold in December that still terrified Lydia. Victor and Lydia still argued about decisions. Money was tighter than it had been when Victor ran the full duchy estate, but it was real. One evening in late December, they sat in the library, James asleep between them in his basket, fire crackling, snow falling outside. Are you happy? Victor asked suddenly. Lydia thought about it. I'm content, which is better than happy, I think. Happy is fleeting. Contentment lasts. That's very philosophical. I've had time to think about it. She looked at him. Are you happy? I'm terrified constantly. James could get sick. You could realize you deserve better. The duchy could demand we return. Everything could fall apart. That's not an answer. It is, though, because despite the terror, I wouldn't change anything. This life, messy and uncertain and nothing like what I planned, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. You've gotten sentimental. I've gotten honest. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep, watching snow accumulate outside. What happens next? Lydia asked eventually. We keep going. We raise James. We build this life. We protect what matters. And if Edward comes back, if someone else challenges us, then we fight again. Victor took her hand. But together, always together. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no grand ball, no public vindication, no moment where everyone who doubted them fell to their knees in apology. Just a family in a drafty manor, surviving winter, raising a child, building a partnership from the ruins of what came before. But as Lydia sat there, Victor's hand in hers, James breathing softly beside them, future uncertain, but finally theirs to shape, she thought maybe that was better than any fairy tale. Real, hard, worth fighting for, and absolutely, undeniably theirs. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire kept burning. And in the basket between them, James dreamed whatever dreams babies dream, safe and warm and loved beyond measure. The war was over. The survival was just beginning. And for the first time in years, Lydia was ready for it. Spring came to Thornwick like a promise kept. The ice melted. Crocuses pushed through frost-hardened ground. The stream that ran through the village ran clear again, no longer choked with winter debris. James was 9 months old, pulling himself up on furniture, babbling in sounds that almost resembled words. He had Victor's dark hair and Lydia's eyes, and a determination that belonged entirely to himself. Lydia was in the clinic one April morning when a rider arrived from the capital. Not a messenger, a royal courier, which meant official business. She signed for the letter with dread coiling in her stomach. But when she opened it, the contents weren't what she expected. The king requests the presence of Duke and Duchess Blackmore at the spring gathering. A formal recognition ceremony will be held for the heir. Attendance is mandatory. Lydia read it 3 times, trying to parse the meaning. Victor found her still standing there 20 minutes later, letter in hand. "What's wrong?" "The king wants us at court, for a formal recognition ceremony for James." Victor took the letter, scanned it. His expression went carefully neutral. "This could be genuine, or it could be a trap." Edward agreed to drop his challenges. Edward did. The king didn't sign that agreement. Victor set the letter down. This could be the monarchy's way of ending the controversy publicly, or it could be their way of declaring James illegitimate in front of the entire court. Lydia felt cold spread through her chest. "We have to go, don't we? We don't have a choice. Refusing a royal summons." He didn't finish. They both knew what refusing meant. So 3 weeks later, they traveled to the capital with James, Maggie, and enough anxiety to choke on. The city felt different this time. Or maybe Lydia felt different, less scared, more ready to fight if necessary. They stayed at the same townhouse as before. Lady Catherine visited the first evening, bringing news. "The court is divided," she said without preamble. "Half think this ceremony is the king acknowledging James as legitimate. Half think it's a public shaming. No one knows for certain." "Comforting," Lydia said dryly. "I'm not here to comfort. I'm here to prepare you." Catherine accepted tea from Victor. "The king has been watching this situation closely. He doesn't like scandal, but he also doesn't like uncertainty. This ceremony is his way of forcing resolution." "In whose favor?" "That's what we're all wondering." Catherine sipped her tea. "But I'll tell you this, you have more support than you think. The families who visited your summer estate, they've been talking, sharing their observations, building a case for James's legitimacy based on personal experience rather than medical theory. Will that be enough?" "It might be, if you show up strong, if you don't flinch." Catherine looked at Lydia directly. "Can you do that? Stand in front of the entire court and dare them to question you?" Lydia thought about the past year, everything she'd survived, everything she'd become. "Yes," she said simply, "I can." The ceremony was held in the grand hall of the royal palace, a room designed to intimidate, vaulted ceilings, marble floors, hundreds of nobility packed into tiered seating, all watching. Lydia walked in wearing a dress that had been altered to fit her changed body, holding James on her hip. Victor walked beside her, hand at the small of her back. A unit, a family. The whispers started immediately. "That's her? The baby's so small. Do you think—" Lydia kept her eyes forward, focused on the throne at the far end of the hall where the king sat. 60-something, stern-faced, unreadable. They stopped at the designated spot. Knelt. Rose when instructed. The king studied them in silence. Then he spoke, voice carrying across the hall. "Duke Blackmore, Duchess, you have presented your son as heir to the duchy. But questions have been raised regarding his legitimacy. Questions that have divided this court and created uncertainty." Here it comes, Lydia thought. The condemnation. "Such uncertainty cannot stand," the king continued. "So I have conducted my own investigation, consulted my own physicians, reviewed the evidence presented by both sides." Lydia felt Victor tense beside her. "And I have concluded—" The king paused, letting the silence stretch. "That medical science, for all its advancements, remains imperfect. That diagnoses, however confident, can be wrong. And that the testimony of those who have personally witnessed this child's development carries weight." Lydia's heart hammered. Therefore, I declare James Blackmore to be the legitimate heir to the Duchy of Blackmore. Let there be no further question, no further challenge. This matter is settled by royal decree. The hall erupted. Some applauded, others protested. Arguments broke out in the tiered seating. The king raised a hand for silence. Furthermore, he said, voice cutting through the chaos, I wish to recognize Duchess Hartwell personally. You have been subjected to accusations, exile, and persecution. Yet you have conducted yourself with dignity and strength. You have served your community as a healer. You have raised your son through illness and hardship. You have demonstrated the qualities we should expect from nobility: service, resilience, and grace under pressure. Lydia felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. Approach, the king commanded. Lydia walked forward on shaking legs, still holding James. The king stood, and the entire hall fell silent. I restore to you your full title and standing. I acknowledge your son as legitimate heir, and I offer you this. He held out a sealed document, a royal charter establishing a formal healing clinic in Thornwick-on-Marsh, funded by the crown, with you as its director. Medical care for those who cannot afford it otherwise. Lydia took the document with trembling hands. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say you accept. Say you'll continue the work you've already been doing. Say you'll show this court that nobility is about service, not just privilege. I accept. Her voice barely worked. Thank you. The king smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. Thank you, Duchess, for reminding us all what we should be. When she returned to Victor's side, he was looking at her with something like awe. You just became the first noble in history to be recognized for healing commoners, he whispered. I became the first noble to survive your family's politics, she corrected. Everything else is just bonus. The reception afterward was surreal. People who'd ignored Lydia for years suddenly wanted to talk to her, to congratulate her, to ask about the healing clinic. Lady Catherine appeared at her elbow, smirking. Enjoy this. Half these people were ready to call you an adulteress last week. I know, it's nauseating. It's politics, smile. Accept their false praise and use them for funding when you need it. Lydia laughed despite herself. You're terrible. I'm practical, there's a difference. Edward made a brief appearance, looking like he'd swallowed glass. He approached stiffly. Congratulations, he said, the word clearly painful. Thank you, Lydia responded because there was nothing else to say. For what it's worth, Edward stopped, struggling. You earned this. I didn't want to admit it, but you did. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. Lydia chose to take it as such. We all make mistakes, she said quietly. Some of us learn from them. Edward looked at her, then at James, then walked away without another word. Victor appeared beside her. That was generous. That was strategic. Edward's not a threat anymore, but he could be an ally if we're smart. You've gotten Machiavellian. I've gotten realistic. Lydia shifted James to her other hip. Can we leave now? I'm exhausted. Soon, one more person wants to meet you. The young physician from the medical board approached, looking nervous. Duchess Hartwell, I wanted to apologize for the board's indecision, for not supporting you more strongly. You supported me as much as you could, Lydia said, within the constraints of your position. Still, I should have been braver. He looked at James. May I? Lydia hesitated, then allowed him to examine James briefly. The physician smiled. He's thriving, growing well. You've done excellent work. Maggie did most of it. Maggie taught you. You applied it. That's partnership. He straightened. I'd like to be involved in your clinic, if you'll have me. I think there's much I could learn from your approach. Lydia studied him, young, earnest, willing to learn. What's your name? Dr. Thomas Wells. All right, Dr. Wells, if you're serious about learning village medicine and you can handle the fact that sometimes old women know more than medical texts, then yes, you're welcome. His face lit up. Thank you. You won't regret this. After he left, Victor shook his head. You're building something, aren't you? Not just a clinic, an entire system. Someone has to. If nobility won't serve common people, what's the point of nobility? That's dangerously progressive thinking. Good. Maybe it's time for dangerous progress. They left the reception an hour later, James asleep against Lydia's shoulder, exhausted from all the attention. Back at the townhouse, Maggie was waiting. Well? The king declared James legitimate, Lydia said, and gave me a royal charter for the clinic. Maggie's eyebrows rose. Did you slip something in his tea? Because that's suspiciously generous. I think he was making a point about what nobles should be doing. Or he was covering his own political backside by resolving a messy situation. Maggie took James. Either way, you won. Now what? Now we go home, Victor said, and we build the clinic properly. And we figure out how to run a duchy and a healing practice and raise a child simultaneously. Sounds impossible, Sagzi, Maggie said. Good thing we specialize in impossible, Lydia replied. They returned to Thornwick a week later to find the village had heard the news. Someone had strung banners across the main street. Welcome home, Your Grace, in crooked letters that made Lydia's chest tight. Brennan was waiting at the manor with ale and a grin. Heard you told the king how things should run. I didn't tell him anything. Close enough. Village is proud of you, both of you. He nodded at Victor. Even you, Duke. You've grown on us. Like mold? Victor asked dryly. Like a decent neighbor who happens to have a fancy title. Brennan raised his mug. To the Duchess, who became one of us, and the heir who survived everything they threw at him. The village toasted with enthusiasm, and Lydia felt something in her chest expand. This was home. Not the palace, not the grand estates. This shabby, stubborn village where people knew her name and her failures and her strength. Work began on the formal clinic in May. The Crown had allocated generous funds, but Lydia supplemented with her own money, what remained of her allowance and what Victor could spare. She wanted it done right, not just a building, a statement. Dr. Wells arrived in June, enthusiastic and slightly overwhelmed. This is rustic, he said, looking at Thornwick. This is real, Lydia corrected. Cities are where you practice medicine. Villages are where you learn healing. There's a difference. She assigned him to shadow Maggie, who took one look at the young physician and rolled her eyes. Another fancy doctor who thinks books are better than experience. Then teach him otherwise, Lydia said. Maggie muttered something uncomplimentary, but took Dr. Wells in hand. Within a month, he was delivering babies, treating infections, and learning that village healing required improvisation more than procedure. You were right, he told Lydia one evening. Medical school taught me nothing about this. Medical school taught you theory. This teaches you people. Both matter. The clinic opened in August, a simple building but well-equipped. Examination rooms, storage for medicines, a small recovery area for patients who needed observation. Lydia stood in the main room the morning of opening, James on her hip, and felt overwhelming gratitude. We did it, she said to Victor. You did it. I just paid for it. You supported it. That's more than paying. She looked at him. A year ago, you would have dismissed this as beneath a duchess. Now you're helping me run it. A year ago, I was an idiot. I've learned better. James chose that moment to grab Victor's nose and laugh. See? Lydia smiled. Even he agrees. The first patient was Samuel, the 4-year-old boy Lydia had treated during the winter fever outbreak. His mother brought him in for a lingering cough. Lydia examined him gently, making notes, mixing a simple remedy. He'll be fine, just needs rest and this tincture twice daily. Samuel's mother pressed coins into Lydia's hand. For payment. The clinic is free. I know, but you're not charity. You're a healer doing work. Work gets paid. Lydia accepted the coins because refusing would have been insulting. This was the village's way of maintaining dignity. Payment was respect. Over the following months, the clinic became the heart of Thornwick. People came with everything: injuries, illnesses, pregnancy questions, grief they needed to talk through. Lydia treated them all, sometimes with Dr. Wells's help, sometimes with Maggie's, sometimes alone. Victor managed the estate and helped with James when Lydia was overwhelmed. They'd hired a nanny, a village woman named Ellen, who'd raised 6 children of her own. but Lydia still tried to do most of the baby care herself. "You're going to exhaust yourself," Victor warned one evening when he found her asleep at her desk, medical notes scattered around her. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're trying to be Duchess, healer, mother, and wife all at once. Something has to give." "Nothing gives? I just balance better." "Lydia, I said I'm fine." Her voice came out sharper than intended. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You survived exile by becoming self-sufficient. But you're not alone anymore. Let people help." Lydia looked at him, exhausted and defensive, and slowly realizing he was right. "I don't know how to not do everything myself." "I know, but you're teaching James that he can ask for help. Maybe you should take your own lesson." It was gently said, but true. Lydia started delegating more. Let Dr. Wells handle routine cases. Let Maggie manage the herbal preparations. Let Victor deal with administrative aspects. And slowly, the impossible balance became merely difficult. James's first birthday came in early spring. The village threw a celebration, modest but genuine. Cake made by Brennan's wife, small gifts from families Lydia had treated, children playing while adults talked. James sat in the middle of it all, overwhelmed and delighted, smashing cake into his face with both hands. "He's going to be trouble," Maggie predicted, watching him. "He already is," Lydia agreed fondly. Victor scooped James up, cake and all. The best kind of trouble. Lady Catherine arrived unexpectedly that afternoon, traveling from the capital. "I had to see the birthday boy," she announced, presenting an absurdly extravagant toy that James immediately tried to eat. "You didn't have to come all this way," Lydia said. "I wanted to. Besides, I have news." Catherine accepted tea. "The king was impressed by your clinic. He's considering funding similar ones in other rural areas, using yours as a model." Lydia felt shock ripple through her. "Seriously?" "Completely. You've created something that works, something that serves people who are usually ignored. He wants to replicate it." Catherine smiled. "Congratulations, you're changing the system." "I'm just trying to help my village." That's how all meaningful change starts, with one person trying to help their small corner of the world. After Catherine left, Lydia sat with the news, trying to process it. "This could be bigger than Thornwick," she said to Victor that evening. "It could, if you want it to be." "I don't know what I want. I didn't plan any of this." "The best things are usually unplanned." Victor pulled her close. "You don't have to decide now. Build what you're building here. If it expands, it expands. If it doesn't, you've still changed hundreds of lives." "That feels too small." "It's not. Not to those hundreds of people." By summer, the clinic was running smoothly enough that Lydia could step back slightly. Dr. Wells had proven capable. Maggie was training 2 younger women as assistants. The system worked without Lydia's constant presence, which terrified her. "What if they don't need me anymore?" she asked Maggie one afternoon. The old woman laughed. "Then you've done your job right. Good healers teach themselves out of necessity. You've trained people to continue the work. That's success, not failure." "It feels like failure." "That's because you've spent a year proving your worth. Now you have to accept that you've proven it. People know who you are, what you're capable of. You don't have to keep fighting to validate your existence." It was the hardest lesson Lydia had learned yet. That autumn, the king issued a formal decree establishing crown-funded healing clinics in 6 rural regions based on the Thornwick model. Lydia was named as consulting director, overseeing the implementations, training healers, ensuring quality. It meant travel, responsibility, influence. It meant becoming someone significant in ways she'd never imagined. "You could refuse," Victor said when the appointment came through. "I could. Should I?" "Only you can answer that." Lydia looked at James, now 18 months old, running around the manor with endless energy. Looked at the clinic she'd built. Looked at Victor, who'd become a true partner. "I'll do it," she decided. "But on my terms. I won't leave Thornwick permanently. I won't abandon the clinic here. I'll travel when necessary, but this stays home." "Then that's what we'll do." The first clinic she helped establish was in a village 3 days north of Thornwick. Similar size, similar poverty, desperate need, Lydia arrived with Dr. Wells, spent 2 weeks training local healers, setting up systems, troubleshooting problems. The head woman of the village, a tough old farmer named Iris, cornered Lydia on the last day. "Why are you doing this? You're a duchess. You could be in palaces." "I could be, but I'd rather be useful." Iris studied her. "You've been through something. I can see it in your eyes. Whatever it was broke you and rebuilt you stronger." "Something like that." "Good. Only broken people understand how to truly help other broken people." Iris shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for seeing us." By the end of the year, 3 clinics were operational. 3 more were in planning. Lydia was exhausted, fulfilled, and finally beginning to understand what she'd become. Not a duchess playing at healing, not a cast-off wife proving her worth. Just a woman who'd found her purpose and refused to let anything stop her. James's 2nd birthday arrived with less fanfare but more joy. Just family. Victor, Lydia, Maggie, a few close friends from the village. James was talking now. Simple words, but clear. "Mama. Papa. More cake." He had Victor's stubbornness and Lydia's empathy and a laugh that could light up entire rooms. "He's perfect," Lydia said, watching him play. "He's a toddler who just put dirt in his mouth," Victor corrected. "Let's not oversell it. He's perfect to me." That night, after James was asleep, Lydia and Victor sat in their library, the same room where she'd once sat alone and desperate, learning to survive. "Do you ever think about how different everything could have been?" Victor asked. "Sometimes, if you hadn't exiled me, if I hadn't gotten pregnant, if James hadn't survived." "Regrets?" Lydia thought about it honestly. "No, not regrets. Maybe wishes that it had been less painful, but I wouldn't trade who I became. Even though it cost you so much, especially because it cost me so much. Easy things don't change us. Hard things do." She looked at him. "What about you? Regrets?" "1. That I didn't see who you were sooner, that I wasted 2 years of our marriage trying to make you into something you weren't. You were trying to make me into what you thought a duchess should be. I was trying to make you smaller, manageable, safe." Victor took her hand. "I'm grateful you refused to stay small." "I didn't refuse. I was forced out. Then I chose to grow. Either way, you're extraordinary." "I'm tired." "You can be both." They sat in comfortable silence, years of pain and growth and survival between them. Finally, Lydia said, "I want to expand the clinic system. Train more healers, build networks across the kingdom, make sure no one dies because they couldn't afford or access medical care." "That's ambitious." "I know, but I think I can do it. With help." "You'll have help. Mine. The Crown's. Anyone who sees what you've built and wants to be part of it." "It won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile is." Victor squeezed her hand. "But you've already done the impossible. Everything else is just scaling up." The years that followed were a blur of work and growth. More clinics opened, more healers trained. The system expanded beyond what Lydia had dreamed. James grew, smart, curious, kind. He'd spend hours in the Thornwick clinic watching his mother work, asking endless questions. "Why does fever happen? Why do bones break? Why can't we fix everything?" Lydia answered honestly, teaching him that healing was about helping, not fixing. That sometimes the best medicine was presence. That being useful mattered more than being perfect. By the time James was 5, he could identify common herbs, knew basic first aid, and understood that nobility meant service. "When I'm Duke," he announced one day, "I'm going to make sure everyone has clinics, everywhere." "That's a good goal," Lydia said, trying not to cry. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. You said something very right." Victor overheard and smiled. "He's going to be better than both of us." "He already is," Lydia agreed. The formal recognition came when James was 7. The king invited them to court for a ceremony honoring the healing clinic system's 5th anniversary. Standing in the same grand hall where she'd once faced judgment, Lydia listened to the king praise the initiative that had saved thousands of lives, trained hundreds of healers, and changed how the kingdom approached medical care. "And we owe it all," the king said, "to a woman who refused to accept that exile meant irrelevance, who turned personal tragedy into public service, who demonstrated that true nobility is measured in lives improved, not titles held. The court applauded, genuinely, this time. Lydia stood beside Victor and James, accepting recognition she'd never sought but had undeniably earned. After the ceremony, Edward approached. He was older now, remarried, with children of his own. "Congratulations, yet," he said. "You've built something remarkable." "Thank you. I was wrong about you, about James, about everything." Edward looked at James, who was trying to catch the attention of a palace cat. "He's a good boy. He'll be a good duke." "He will be," Lydia agreed. "Better than I would have been," Edward admitted. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd succeeded in discrediting you. The kingdom would have lost all this." He gestured around. "I would have prevented something genuinely good because I was focused on something ultimately meaningless." "Titles aren't meaningless? Compared to saving lives, they are." Edward smiled sadly. "You taught me that, even if I didn't want to learn it." After he left, Victor shook his head. Did Edward just admit he was wrong? He did. The world really has changed. That evening, back at the townhouse, Lydia found James standing at the window looking at the city. "Mama, why were you sad before?" "What do you mean?" "Papa said you used to be sad. When you lived here, before I was born." Lydia knelt beside him. "I was sad because I didn't know who I was. I was trying to be what other people wanted instead of who I actually was. And now you know? Now I know. I'm a healer, a mother, a duchess, someone who helps people. That's who I am." James considered this. "I want to help people too." "Then you will, when you're older. Can I start now?" Lydia pulled him close. "Yes, sweetheart, you can start now." They returned to Thornwick a week later, and life continued its familiar rhythm: clinic work, estate management, raising James, the endless dance of responsibility and care. But something had shifted. The constant fear that everything could be taken away had faded, replaced by certainty that what they'd built was real, solid, lasting. One evening in late summer, Lydia stood in the clinic after hours, reviewing patient notes. Victor found her there. "You don't have to do this tonight." "I know, but I want to. I like knowing who needs what, who's struggling, who's healing." "You care too much. There's no such thing as caring too much." Lydia set the notes down. "Come here." He crossed to her and she pulled him close. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For letting me go, for giving me space to become this person, for fighting for us when you could have just moved on." Victor touched her face gently. "I didn't let you go. I threw you away. It took me too long to realize what I'd lost. But you did realize, and you came back, and you've been a true partner ever since." Lydia kissed him softly. "That matters." They stood together in the quiet clinic, years of struggle and growth between them, future uncertain, but fundamentally theirs. "I love you," Victor said quietly. "I don't say it enough, but I do." "I know. I love you too, the actual you. Not the Duke, not the title, just you." "That's good, because the actual me is significantly less impressive. The actual you chopped firewood in freezing weather and changed diapers and built a cradle with your own hands. That's plenty impressive." James appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Ellen was behind him, apologetic. "Sorry, Your Grace. He woke up asking for you." Lydia scooped James up. "It's fine. We were just finishing." They walked back to the manor together, all three of them, through the warm summer evening. James fell asleep against Lydia's shoulder. Victor's arm was around her waist, and Lydia thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. Broken, desperate, exiled. That woman would barely recognize this life, but she'd recognize the strength it took to build it. The next morning, Lydia woke early to find a letter had arrived from the Crown. Another region wanted a healing clinic. Would she consult on the implementation? She read it while feeding James breakfast, already mentally planning the trip. "You're going to say yes," Victor observed. "I am, but I'll only be gone a week. Dr. Wells can handle things here. You don't have to justify it. You're allowed to do work you find meaningful. I know, but I still feel guilty leaving. Then take James with you, and me. We'll make it a family trip. Lydia looked at him in surprise. You do that? Why not? I'm a duke. I can work from anywhere. And James should see other parts of the kingdom, learn about different communities. So they went, all three of them, traveling to a mountain village where people needed healing and hope in equal measure. James charmed everyone he met. Victor helped negotiate resources. Lydia trained healers and set up systems. And together, they built something good. When they returned to Thornwick 2 weeks later, Lydia felt something settle in her chest. Not contentment. She'd never be fully content, always seeing more that needed doing, but peace. Peace with who she'd become. Peace with the life they'd built. Peace with the fact that she'd survived the worst and emerged stronger. Years passed. James grew into a thoughtful, capable young man who split his time between duchy education and clinic work. He learned estate management from his father and healing from his mother, understanding both were essential. The healing clinic system expanded to 23 regions, saved thousands of lives, trained hundreds of healers. Lydia became known not as the Duchess who was cast out, but as the Duchess who transformed rural medicine. Victor became known not as the Duke who divorced his wife, but as the Duke who supported revolutionary change, and James became known as the heir who understood service. On the 10th anniversary of the Thornwick Clinic's founding, the village threw a massive celebration. People came from across the kingdom, healers Lydia had trained, families she'd treated, nobles who'd supported the work, common folk who'd benefited from the system. Lydia stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed. Maggie appeared at her elbow, ancient now, moving slowly, but still sharp. You did good, girl. We did good. You taught me everything. I taught you herbs and technique. You learned compassion and dedication on your own. Maggie squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you. Your parents would be too. Lydia felt tears threaten. Her parents had died years ago, never knowing what she'd become. She wished they could see this. They'd be shocked, Lydia said. They'd be amazed. Their delicate daughter became a force of nature. Maggie smiled, though I think they'd have loved that. As evening fell, Lydia found herself back in the library at Thornwick Manor. The same room where she'd sat alone and broken a decade ago. But now it was full. Victor reviewing estate documents, James reading medical texts, the groundskeeper's daughter, now training as a healer, asking questions. Life, noise, purpose. Victor looked up, caught her watching, smiled. What are you thinking? That I wouldn't change anything, not even the pain, because it led here. That's very philosophical. I'm feeling philosophical. Lydia crossed to him. We built something good. Against all odds, despite everyone's expectations. We actually did it. You did it. I just tried to keep up. We did it together. That's the point. She looked at James. And we're passing it on, making sure it continues. James looked up from his book. I was thinking, when I'm Duke, I want to expand the clinic system to cities. Urban poor need care too. That's ambitious, Victor said. That's good, Lydia corrected. Ambitious is good. They talked late into the night about possibilities, plans, dreams, and Lydia realized this was the happy ending she'd never believed in. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real. A family built from ruins, a purpose born from exile, a legacy forged from pain and strength, and absolute refusal to give up. The woman who'd been cast out in the rain had become the woman who changed everything. And the boy who shouldn't have existed had become the heir who would change even more. The rain still fell sometimes on Thornwick Manor, but inside there was warmth, always home, always hope. And that, Lydia thought as she looked at her family, was more than enough. It was everything.